Dr. Jekyll. I tell you, I'm Dr. Jekyll. I'm Dr. Henry Jekyll.
Cinematic Fantastic.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
Bitten by a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
It's time to get out of your hiding holes, because today we're doing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde 1941.
Wait, did you say Jekyll?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to say Jekyll, because this movie does not call him Jekyll, it calls him Jekyll. In the 1931, they say Jekyll this and Jekyll that, like a treacle.
Like a true person. Exactly.
This is the 1941 version of the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
And, oh, sorry. By the way, welcome to Cinematic Fantastic.
Yeah, hi, welcome.
We're rearranging things just a little bit here. Uniquely, this movie is a remake of the 1931 film, which we haven't done a remake before. We've done sequels, but we haven't done a remake. That's interesting. And as such, most of the plot discussion for this episode is going to mostly be comparison. The plot'll be what the plot'll be when we do the plot. This time, we're going to go over some production history. I've done some work and researching.
Yep.
And so you want to get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, indeed. So, definitely one thing to say is it's a pretty good film. The director for this, Victor Fleming, was also the director of Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. It's in good hands, but there'll always be that comparison in any remake that is it's just the core of anything. That you go like, oh, this thing is remaking another thing. How does it compare to the original? Like, what is the original better? Did this, like, desecrate the original permanently? Is it banished to the ends of time because it's that good or that bad? You don't know.
Yeah, well, the other thing is too is how much new ground did it break in the story? You know, what are some things in which some good things that it did? Honestly, your opinion may be different, but I think it spent longer on certain sequences. It took longer to get where the 1930s version just blazed on through, and it felt like it was, even though it got all the different plot points that this movie did. It did it at a kind of a little bit zippier pace. I did like the makeup better in the first one, even though I understand where they were going, what they were going for with this movie.
But yeah, Ruben Mamoulian, the director of the last one, was indeed a lot better at pacing than this movie is. More drawn out. Of course, Victor Fleming really wanted that, I guess, but both of them would share the same plot, basically, because 1941 is remaking the 1931 version, which came out a decade earlier, and the 1931 version is based mostly off of the stage adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
That's true. And some of the elements that were in the 1930s version were not in the original novel. Namely, Ivy was Champagne Ivy was what we're going to call her in the first in the 30s one. She and also the wife of Dr. Jekyll or whatever. She was not part of the filming either. It was part of the stage version, I think, and that's what carried over.
Yes, the both of them sort of sprouted from the first movie, going like, hey, we take this and add a bit of this clay. So there's a bit of an elephant in the room. If you haven't listened to our original, the one where we did the original version of this in our first season, don't click off yet. I will restate the information here. As we discussed in our previous episode on Jekyll and Hyde, similar to what happened with The Old Dark House, 1932, this movie, upon MGM acquiring the rights, was hid away to avoid competition by burning all the negatives, all of the copies of the film. And it made that film considered lost for at least 20, 30 years. They buried it, man. And because Paramount did not own the rights, if they ever wanted to show even the copies that they did have from previous distribution, they would encounter legal issues because, of course, they did not own the rights. And MGM did these scummy things a lot around this era. For instance, there was a movie called Gaslight, which was remade in 1944, and the only reason we have that original one is because the director managed to shepherd a negative that he had personally and slip it back in the archive under their noses. So if he had not had his own copy of it, then we wouldn't even have that film. They would have been successful in burying it forever with an inferior version.
Right. It doesn't seem that some of these companies, these production companies or film studios, that they had like this they seem like that they can only see as far as their nose or their face. They can only see like 5 months ahead or a year ahead. They didn't see a world in which classic movies could be viewed by anybody on streaming now.
Exactly. They didn't care about, keeping these historical documentations, restored and available and kept safe in saves, and like instead they really cared about, this is going to compete with our previous with our film. We're going to go we're not even going to go, hey, advertise this film as it's so much better than that last movie. Instead it'll be the only one that they think about. They go like, hey, you remember that Dr. Jekyll movie? Oh, it was sure great. They go look it up on Google and they go, oh, 1941, I'll click that. Obviously I won't have Google, but
Right. Yeah, they can do that now, but it's the same thing that the BBC did. If I don't know if I remember telling you this, but
BBC did burn a lot of their TV shows, especially Doctor Who was the infamous one due to space. They didn't have the space to
they're like,
keep.
we don't have the room. Are you kidding me? Get a new warehouse. Put old Doctor Who stuff in there.
It was more expensive, and
Yeah.
BBC is like this. How much could they spend on storing old stuff?
BBC comes from tax money.
Distributing stuff.
It comes from the people. It's kind of like
Yeah, it's public funded.
like PBS does that, but this is way more high value, to be honest. And probably the taxes are huge in England. Some people are like, I don't like the BBC. Do I still have to pay? But the thing is now, I bet you the BBC are kicking themselves, going, man, we put out these DVDs of Doctor Who episodes from back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, 80s. But there's some of those ones from the, I guess the 60s. I don't remember what Doctor it was, but they're missing a lot of those episodes. People had to recreate them. They had the sound.
It was the first Doctor, a lot of the second Doctor,
Yes.
and I think the third Doctor is where we have a lot more.
Yeah, we have a lot more of the third. Yeah, we're getting off topic, but we're only in the same world. It shows that they weren't thinking very far ahead. A lot of these companies weren't.
A lot of these companies think, oh, this is old trash that we're gonna get rid of and replace with the newer stuff.
We made our money. We made
oftentimes
the
when they're
money
limited,
in the
they're
box
like,
office.
we can't really do anything better than that. So there's a name I'm gonna bring up briefly. I'm going to elaborate on this name later, which is Katharine Hepburn.
Yes.
In relation to Spencer Tracy, I will elaborate on who she is later. So even though he had not met Katharine Hepburn personally yet, Spencer Tracy wanted her to play both of the women in this picture.
Ivy and
as you said, Ivy
Beatrice.
and Beatrice in this picture, so the parallels may be drawn that they're the exact same person, apparently.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting take on it. But he also, to be honest, I believe he had a thing for Katharine Hepburn, both professionally and personally.
He would not know her personally yet, though, and as I will discuss is the history of Spencer Tracy,
Right.
How Katharine Hepburn is introduced into that.
I love
Speaking of the
Katharine
two
Hepburn.
ladies,
She's
also
great.
Ingrid Bergman and Lana Turner, the two actors for them, beautiful actors, as I said, were originally swapped from their current roles, as Ivy is the one that Hyde looks for, the evil-ish side, versus
She's
B,
more
which
low
is
class.
versus B, which is the high-class, good person, basically, the good
Quote
lady.
unquote, yeah.
They're originally swapped from the current roles until Bergman, not wanting to be typecasted into the good type, which she often was, she pleaded that they switch roles. And so they're like, okay, we'll do a screen test, see if you actually do good as Ivy, and she did.
It worked, yeah. And I will tell you that she does her best to kind of pull off a kind of the British kind of accent, and she does okay with it, but, she does have a European accent. She always has. That's been, like, one of the things that you would recognize about her. When she would speak, you'd be like, oh, yeah.
I will say that in the original movie, Miriam Hopkins was much more iconic.
Yeah, and she did play the whole Cockney, oi, she had champagne Ivy, she had that kind of that low-class way
She
of
was
talking.
recognizable at a glance, and also from if she was speaking off screen, you'd go like, "Oh, that I know who you are," because of her, unique, one and only, which is what unique means.
Man, it was
Voice.
hard. It was hard for me to see Ingrid Bergman as playing this role, even though she did a great job. I think she did a great job on it. But it was hard for me to watch her in this role because all the roles I've seen her in, yeah, she was like the leading lady. She was never like completely evil. If she was a femme fatale in like a noir movie, okay, I get it. But
And we'll talk more about that when we get to her history.
yeah.
Now, again, as we discussed in our 1931 episode in season 1, Ivy was invented in that movie, and but in this movie, she was definitely watered down, as well as a lot of the elements in this movie comparative to the previous movie, because of the Hays Code's introduction, which would limit, a bunch of things, like this one monolithic company would control all movies and go like, hey, this is way too hard for children, we can't let this, you have to tone it down. Anything and everything had to go by it, and they were harsher than they are nowadays is the MPA. Also, another thing that Spencer Tracy originally wanted for this movie, he originally wanted a realistic approach whereby Jekyll would commit violent deeds in a neighborhood where he was unknown after drinking alcohol and using substances. So basically the transformation is, I get drunk and I go punch ladies, and that's the whole transformation. I guess it wasn't, it sort of makes sense slightly on paper, but I don't know.
Well, let's put it this way. Okay,
it's a rough idea.
Well, think about this, though. There is kind of a parallel, if you think about it, because it's like man who is good drinks something, and then now his inhibitions are gone, and he's punching ladies and beating people with a cane.
And I feel like Hyde in this movie is definitely more along those lines feeling than is in the first movie. But he was disappointed that the producers, instead of making, of course, new ideas for this film, they wanted to remake the earlier film instead because that movie's ideas were proven to work. And after all, you want to go, I don't want to invent something new, and it's risky. You don't know if people are going to, hook onto this idea. They go like, I don't know about what this kind of movie would be like. And instead, they're like, okay, we're going to do what works. And that often is in the industry. They often do recycle what
absolutely
works.
That's absolutely true. Producers, a lot of times you'll wonder why a movie, why remakes are constantly being made, live action remakes or whatever. Is they're going, well, the other one did well. It's a gamble. Nobody likes to gamble.
Yes, with Disney and Disney subsidiaries, they do that a lot. They don't want to gamble with the new properties. They don't get as much money as The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid, three words that win you all the Oscars and all the Boogie Bucks. So let's get on to the reception of this movie. This movie was Oscar nominated for Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, and Best Music / Scoring.
It wasn't Best Actor. And it wasn't. I think didn't Frederick March win for Best Actor?
Yes.
But I think that they first thought that maybe Spencer Tracy was too old to play this part here in this. I think he was like 41, and Frederick March was much younger when he played Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, funnily enough, he was born at the turn of the thousands, the turn of the century or whatever.
Oh, the 1900s.
1900 exactly. It's funny. Anyway,
Right.
This movie earned $2,351,000, resulting in a profit of $350,000. They had a $1 million budget, so that was pretty sweet.
It was okay. Did okay at the box office.
Pretty good.
After Spencer Tracy saw his performance, though, he thought his career was over.
Yes, well, this film was a commercial success. It wasn't really a critical success, and Spencer Tracy later said it was by far the least favorite film that he ever did. They ever starred in, and his performance was awful. And honestly, it is not really. I mean,
I hate to say this. I said this while we were watching the movie.
Like
I don't
in the
think
previous movie,
he didn't pull off the British accent. He sounded really American, and he sounded like a tough. He sounded like kind of a tough guy.
I could say so. But in the previous movie, like the performance of March really expressed his desires and the theme of sin that goes about. In this movie, we talked about that in the original, the 1931 Jekyll and Hyde episode. And this movie didn't really do that at all, and this Hyde really isn't monstrous or out of control as was in the 1931 movie. This Hyde seems like just some revolting, creepo, drunk dude. I
Yeah,
guess.
he does. Yeah, absolutely.
It was more similar to the book character, I'll give you that, but not. It's really just this, it just if a dude gets drunk and then he goes out into town
and doesn't shower for weeks
and doesn't shower for weeks.
Gets crusty under his eyes. Yeah, that's what he looked like to me. And had bad teeth. That's it. What they were trying to do in this movie, though, I think, and they said so, I think, a little bit in some of the making of stuff, they were saying that they wanted it to look like he could look like any person that you might meet. That their evil wasn't necessarily out on their face. It was inside.
They were trying to show in this movie that the mind should be the sign of corruptness and not physical transformation. I get that, but they really did get across the same, sin elements, for lack of a better word, and the expressions of it. But they don't really voice them because of the code, which is interesting.
Yes. And also the other, well...
So it's like, I sort of get the same, you can watch these two movies, and even though, the words might be different because of the code, or they don't say a lot of the things, it does get across the same sort of point. You sort of get who these characters are, or at least are in comparison to the previous movie.
I will tell you, there's two elements that I found interesting. One of them was this movie starts off with a tip of the hat to religion. It's actually in a church that this movie starts. And they give little tips of the hat to religion, just like the original version. But they don't go into they don't lean into it.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about how this affects that movie later. And I'd like to see some of the reviews that newspapers gave this movie at the time.
Okay.
So after a preview in July, they got early access to this film, I guess. Variety, we've talked about this magazine a lot.
Yes.
Saw some weaknesses in the character development and situations in this movie. I don't know. But we're overall very positive. They said it would be one of the big ones for fall release. The review is, Tracy plays the dual roles with conviction. His transformations from the young physician to the demonic Mr. Hyde are brought together with considerably less alterations in face and stature than audience might expect. Of course, referring to John Barrymore and Frederick March, the two actors behind the 1931 version, and the further 1921 or 2 version, I believe.
Yeah, they all...
Which I haven't seen. It's silent, though. It's interesting.
We can easily find it. It's online. But they did twist their bodies and their faces up, contortions and makeup, a lot more than Spencer Tracy did.
Yes, like the Frederick March Hyde, like the March Hyde, which sounds like the March Hare, funnily enough. I'm going to call him the March Hyde from now on, but the March Hyde, he looks very simian.
Yes, he does. Yeah, almost like it's a primeval.
In this movie, as I said, he looks like creepo drunk dude. Anyway.
Yeah, guy who hasn't had any sleep.
Continuing, likely to happen when the new Jekyll moves into general distribution after September 1st, is more generous recognition of Ingrid Bergman as a screen actress of exceptional ability. In every scene in which the two appear,
in her roles,
is Tracy's equal as a strong screen personality. And the New York Times described it famously or infamously as not so much evil incarnate as ham rampant, more ludicrous than dreadful.
Yeah.
They did not like it that much. Like, these newspapers, man, the way they phrase things. The Film Daily praised it mostly for the direction of this movie, such as Fleming's pacing and staging of the story, and described his handling as flawless. As I said, Robert Mamoulian's, I don't know.
Yeah, you're doing okay.
Ruben Mamoulian's.
Ruben
Mamoulian's, the director of the previous movie. His pacing was a lot better. Although I could say the direction of the movie is pretty solid, especially with the dude who did, The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, for goodness sakes.
The cinematography I believe deserved, definitely. The music is okay. I don't really remember a lot of the scores because there's actually some parts where they avoid a score, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, in terms of the cinematography, there were some interesting angles, like it along with the sets.
Shadowing and lighting of the...
I like those scenes of Hyde sprinting through these long Victorian streets that are just iconic now for this.
That's very nice.
Hyde. And of course, in this movie, of the human Hydes, it really emphasized the famous image of a man in a black cape, cane, and top hat. Mm-hmm. And obviously having an abnormal head, the March Hyde couldn't wear the hat, at least to the potential of this famous silhouette, in my opinion.
He tried.
He tried, definitely, but like this,
It wouldn't stay on.
like
probably.
the image of the human with this crazy face, top hat, and a cane and cape looking thing, this British outfit sprinting across these Victorian streets, really in this movie shines as like more of what you'd think of Hyde as, at least in that element that wasn't really done in the previous movie. He was more like walking and, you know, like glancing around
he would
like
he would,
an animal in the previous
he
movie.
He would like hunch down almost like monkey like, you know, an animal like. You're right, beast man.
Yeah, the bestial behavior and awareness that the movie in this Hyde doesn't really have, that sort of adds to the character more of Hyde in the previous movie, which is why I like him a bit more. Scariness.
I did like, and also it was more daring too. It was willing to talk about things like, you know, perdition and you know, I'm going, you know, he's like, I feel the fires of hell on me, and he's begging his wife to take it back. I'm talking about the 1931 version or whatever. They didn't really do a lot of that here, but the other thing is how the first one ends is with the fires. You know, you can see the fire.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, but again, in terms of the budget and you know, the critical reception stuff, there's definitely bigger budget and production value in this movie that MGM has. But the previous movie had a lot going for it that this movie doesn't really have.
Really better transformation sequences. I mean, the transformation sequences are like shocking to see.
Yeah, like the
31.
sets in we're starting to go a bit more in comparison. Sets have been expanded in this movie. Sound quality was better.
Yes.
There was amazing lighting compared to the 1930s. Just this glossiness that's like in the 1940s. For like some reason, they just did it so much better. It's got a Frank Waxman score. When it was there, obviously. Frank Waxman, by the way, he did the scores for Bride of Frankenstein, and therefore the 1930s Flash Gordons that apparently because they used its music, interesting enough. 1938's Christmas Carol, Sunset Boulevard, Rear Window by
Alfred Hitchcock.
Alfred Hitchcock, right? He is I would consider him a great classic movie composer alongside, you know, people like Max Steiner, who did King Kong's score, and Eric Korngold, who's the inspiration of John Williams.
Yes.
I would definitely say. The Film Daily praised it mostly. The general public, however, in comparison to these magazines, was a bit more mixed about this one. Contemporary fantasy magazine Hollywood says, in the 10 years that have elapsed since March won his Oscar for his work at the title roles, moviegoers have become too sophisticated for the sort of medical hocus-pocus on which the Stevenson story is based. Robert Louis Stevenson is the author of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the book that's the origin of this.
They didn't think it was realistic enough? They were like, oh yeah, we'll buy a magic
potion. Yeah, moviegoers are too sophisticated for medical hocus-pocus on which the Stevenson story is based. Too many Frankensteins and bogeymen have stalked across the screen in the interim for Mr. Hyde to be a convincing monster. While Spencer Tracy does a grand job in his dual role, his Mr. Hyde is inclined to be more humorous than terrifying. I will give you that. I
don't know. He was creepy, but I would not say humorous. I would never say humorous about his performance. He looks unhinged. He looks like he could do some damage, but I do think I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. Yeah, he did kind of ham it up a little bit, but I'm not going to say humorous as in I laughed at Hyde. He was threatening. I agree.
Yeah, definitely. While the March Hyde's makeup and performance is hard to beat, Tracy's Hyde is still threatening somewhat. Although I could say, of course, the 1931 Hyde is a bit more threatening because, of course, he's got this animalistic behavior and awareness. You don't know what he's gonna really do.
I don't know if anybody was as bad as I mean, we say the director was a really good director, but I wonder if this was a thing back in the day that. The ladies, Ingrid Bergman and Lana Turner, had a hard time shedding tears during certain scenes. So he would like grab their arm hard or give them a slap.
I guess that makes more sense, but I'll probably get to a bit more of that later. Of course, the makeup, as we've been talking about, this Hyde is more humanoid, big teeth, like big regular teeth. Like if you've seen Jim Carrey as The Mask. He has big teeth, sort of like that. That movie honestly looks really crazy. Like everything is cartoony. I don't understand how on earth they could have done that before Toy Story came out, or near Toy Story came out. My goodness. Anyway, wrinkles around the eyes, a fake nose, scraggly eyebrows, crazy gelled hair. which is interesting. It's crazy, but it looks like gelled. It's like gleaming. He looks more like Jekyll than Hyde in the original movie. In the original movie, a point is you never really wondered why Ivy didn't recognize him off the bat. In this movie, since he looks more humanoid, you're sort of like, oh, why wouldn't she recognize him off the bat? He just looks like a drunk Jekyll.
Yeah, he does kind of look still look like Jekyll a little bit. So you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, and so
yeah, but more humorous
why
than
didn't you notice?
terrifying was where we left off. A similar magazine, Modern Screen, called The Oddest Picture of the Year. They said it was funniest when apparently is trying to be most serious and never so routine as when it is trying hardest to be different. That resonates in me, man. Anyway,
right.
This movie has 58% Rotten Tomatoes, average rating 6.6 out of 10. Audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, however, scored 61%, average 3.5 out of 5 based on 2,500 responses. And interestingly enough, Warner Brothers released a Blu-ray version of this movie May of last year. Interestingly enough, it's relatively recent.
Yeah, I wonder if this was like, for a little bit, some of these movies started they wouldn't spend as much money on them because I mean this movie did have some definite this movie has some definite money behind it.
This movie had like lots more money thrown into like the sets and the presentation.
Yeah, but I think that.
But what are you wondering about the money?
Well, because about a couple months after this movie comes out, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, it's the beginning of World War II, so everybody has this idea, this Captain America mindset, this patriotic thing, and so a lot more, movies that did spend money would be more war based or be war adjacent. For a little bit during World War II, I think you started seeing less of these period pieces and more opulently done things like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
So you were worried that since this is 3 months away from the bombing of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, that you're worrying about the money,
No, future movies after this. I mean, they spent.
Oh, you're bringing this up because we're in 1941.
Yes. They put money into it. That's fine, but I think
I would have mentioned it much later, but it's a fact in life. So
it's around that time. Yeah. So.
But yeah, more comparisons that I have here. The first movie is more honest about how sinful people affect the world around them. Like, Ivy in the original movie is more justified in her feelings of escape and death than Ivy in this movie is. And
right.
You're saying she couldn't make tears? Well, I was saying, like, her performance was weaker in general, but, like, I mean, it's probably, if it's that weak, then you probably couldn't make tears, but where, elaborating on this point, Miriam Hopkins, who's the actor for Ivy in the original movie, plays this with much more desperation in general.
Yes.
In this scene that we're referring to when she's crying out to Jekyll to help her against Hyde. More desperation in general than Ingrid Bergman does, having a reason to do so, as Ingrid's Ivy does not really. In Bergman's defense, she was probably more used to being the good girl type. That was her typecast.
Yeah.
And as you said, more prone to smile than to cry. So.
Well, there was emotional moments, even in Casablanca, because you think you're going to lose the love of your life. You're like, oh, I'll never see them again, and that's where tears come in. But I think that when you are, I guess if you don't feel threatened by Spencer Tracy in whacked out makeup, then you're gonna have to kind of go, okay.
Wow, you just threw around Casablanca just like that. You just threw that in there, and you didn't even stop to go like, hey, by the way, she's in Casablanca. Really extremely great movie. Humphrey Bogart, go see it. It's actually, I think is it a 1942 movie? It was 1940.
Oh, I hate to mention it, and it was 42. So, sorry, that's a future movie she's gonna be in. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I had thought that she
No, don't apologize. I'm just saying, like, you sort of threw that in there, and then we have to go, like, whoa. I'm about to talk about that, actually. Let's start talking about the actors. Let's just contracted actors to MGM, interestingly enough. Let's start with Spencer Tracy.
Okay.
He is pretty famous role. He was perfect for internalized and repressed emotion and anger, especially in 1936's Fury. Which was directed by Fritz Lang, director of
our old
M.
friend Fritz Lang. Yeah.
Old friend Fritz Lang from Germany, director of M. It was a really great, well-done movie. It's in our Cinematic Classics month, which covers like some of the best movies around in of all time. So
Yep, of the
maybe
gold,
go check that out after
of
this
this
is over.
golden era. Yes.
But yeah, internalized and repressed emotion and anger was really what they could go like, oh, maybe we should get this. That's probably the reason that they got this dude. So born on April 5th, 1900. It'd been funny if he was born on April 1st, 1900. So it's like April
Wow.
Fools, you were born directly in 1900. Anyway,
Nice.
In Wisconsin, Spencer Tracy began his career in the theater, honing his craft and perfecting his skills in various stage productions.
That's a lot of people started that way. A lot of people go, oh, they started on Broadway.
Yeah, we're
They
going to
started
talk
in
about, we've
theater,
been
yeah.
talking about a lot. We're going like, oh, they're on Broadway. And then they went to movies. And that's it. That's the general scheme.
Right.
But some people have more to their story than that. And Spencer Tracy is one of them. Tracy's exceptional talent caught the attention of Hollywood scouts, leading to his transition from the stage to the silver screen in the early 1930s. And Tracy's breakthrough, of course, which they recognized him from, came from his portrayal of Manuel Fidello in the 1930 film The Last Mile. And then, I would say, in Up the River with Humphrey Bogart, where he'd get contracted to Fox Films. His acting as Manuel showcased Tracy's understated yet powerful acting style and marked the beginning of a remarkable career that would see him earn 9 Oscar nominations, which was an unmatched record at the time. So as I said, understated yet powerful acting style, internalized and repressed emotion and anger is really the key points.
He was a big star at the time, and
he got
huge.
to a big star, and his status would be further cemented, particularly in films like State of the Union, 1948, and we talked about this in our Invisible Woman episode. It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, 1963.
Yeah,
which is pretty great comedy film. I want to actually see how good it is.
It's a kooky mad.
It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World that they live in. A Mad, 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 Mad movie.
Well, it's kind of like they're headed somewhere to kind of. It's a bunch of actors with cameos and cuckoo nuts scenes. Yeah.
Wasn't there like a sequel they had in the plans called It's a Mad, 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 Mad Mad World with like an extra mad? I don't know.
I don't know
that
how
would
many
make a lot of
mads this
sense
movie
if they
had.
were doing it today. Just add a mad every time.
There
they
was
make
a
sequel.
movie called Rat Race, which was a homage to this kind of movie, where it had just a bunch of different actors thrown into crazy situation on a cross-country race to do something.
Where they go like, oh, we're gonna have the guy who plays the guy who plays John Wick.
Oh, Keanu Reeves.
We'll put Keanu Reeves, Dwayne Johnson, and an old Boris Karloff all in a mixing pot and see what happens.
Yes, and you give them kooky characters, and they all have some goal that intertwines, and they have to get something.
Although
that would
make Keanu Reeves and Dwayne Johnson really young to be in 1960 movie.
Yeah, we get it.
Boris
So yeah,
Karloff.
I honestly think those movies. The thing that their claim to fame was that they had all these actors in it, and a cast of hundreds, and I'm like, to be honest,
All your favorite actors.
They don't impress me very much. They seem very by the numbers. Here's a joke, there's a joke. Jokes, coming, fast and furious, so to speak. But yeah, you're welcome to find it somewhere, but I don't know.
Okay, that's your opinion on It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Awesome. So, probably Tracy's most famous matchup would be with Katharine Hepburn. A 9-movie matchup starting with Woman of the Year, 1942, which earned Tracy his first Academy Award for Best Actor. And, of course, him and Katharine Hepburn would stick together like,
peas and carrots. Peanut butter and
no,
jelly.
They say that, but I was gonna say
were not married.
the
They
music.
never...
Who was the musical people? The musical person?
What, Rodgers and Hammerstein?
No.
No. Romeo and Juliet? I don't know.
Well, it was a movie from Peter Lorre was in it, and Peter Lorre was in it. Let me see.
Like Humphrey Bogart and... No?
It was a comedy film.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Arsenic and Old Lace, which had...
They would stick together like Bing Crosby and the other dude, Danny Kaye?
What was the guy and the girl mashup, which was... Yeah, I guess you could say peas and carrots.
Peas and carrots, carrots and peas, peanut butter and jelly. They had a long-standing relationship. I don't think they ever got married. It was kind of a open secret that they had that long-term relationship going. They stayed together for like 20 years, man. like up until his death. He was married before in like the 30s, and he got separated, which is kind of like what you do before a divorce. But I don't think he actually officially got divorced from that wife he got separated from.
Yeah, we'll talk about slight spoilers because I'm about to talk about some of that. Again, Woman of the Year earned his first Academy Award for Best Actor. Others to note are Adam's Rib, 1949, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967, which would be his last movie, completed 17 days before he died due to heart attack. And as we talked about in our previous Jekyll and Hyde episode, Frederick March and Spencer Tracy were both together in Inherit the Wind, which is a movie. They're attorneys in a battle in the matter of teaching evolution in schools.
Yeah, the Scopes monkey trial. Yep.
Yeah, the Scopes monkey trial.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's a very famous role for him. That got him a lot of acclaim. William Jennings Bryan, I think, was one of the characters in it. But yeah, definitely. A lot of those quote screwball comedies that we mentioned, Katharine Hepburn is in quite a few of those. It's that she has that transatlantic accent. You know, she's a very distinct looking lady and very, you just can't keep your eyes off her. She has a very interesting way about her, and she commands the screen. And a lot of those movies had this like I said, but when we talked to Invisible Woman, we talked about screwball comedies. It has this rapid fire speaking style. I think I put a list of some of the best ones on the blog. I think I put that up on there, and quite a few of those have Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. One of those was a Libeled Lady, I think had Spencer Tracy in, and that was a screwball comedy. But he was not in that with Katharine Hepburn. I think he was with somebody else. I think in Libeled Lady. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, he was really good at that kind of thing. But I'm wondering if this kind of movie he wanted to. Oh yeah, Myrna Loy, Jean Harlow, William Powell. Yep. Myrna Loy was a big star at the time. She was very well known. Kind of going into that. Yeah, and William Powell. William Powell would get a lot of work out of his roles. I've seen him in his name mentioned a lot of movies. Okay,
let's talk about Ingrid Bergman.
Yes.
She was a very influential star. She started her career training as an actress at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm. She's Swedish. Her early work in Swedish films garnered attention and praise, but it was a role in Intermezzo, 1936, directed by Swedish director Gustav Molander, that truly showcased her talent and brought her into the limelight. She would then be the girl lead in the timeless Casablanca, as we said, alongside Humphrey Bogart. She was in the 1944 remake of Gaslight, What Comes Around Again.
Yes.
Bergman's personal life was not without controversy, though. Her decision to leave her husband and daughter in Sweden to pursue a relationship with Italian director Roberto Rossellini caused a scandal in the U.S., and she's persevered despite the backlash in her career taking a dip because of it. She did eventually make a triumphant return with the 1956 film Anastasia, reinstating her career. Obviously not the animated one, I wouldn't think, that came out in 1956.
It's what the animated one's probably based off of, yeah.
Next, let's talk about Lana Turner as Beatrice Emery in this film. One of the high-pay actresses in the U.S., 1940s, a big star in the 1940s for MGM. She was born in Ohio in 1921. Her childhood was full of strife and adversity due to divorce, but being eyed in a local drugstore by the publisher of The Hollywood Reporter for her beauty, they did a screen test, and she contracted herself to MGM. Alongside with this movie, she really made herself out as that classic femme fatale in such movies as The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1946, and Paid in Place, for which she was nominated Best Actress. Talking personal life, she had newsworthy, tumultuous relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Highly publicized marriages and divorces. Her daughter was killed by her boyfriend in 1958, which caused a wrongful death lawsuit of $750,000. That's a whole fiasco. But she did co-star with Sean Connery in Another Time, Another Place at the same time. But it gave lackluster proceeds and critical reviews, so it couldn't help there. But Sean Connery, a young Sean Connery, who would Sean Connery be? Indiana Jones and Last Crusade.
Yes, and James Bond.
And James Bond.
And he's
Wow, I didn't realize when young he was James Bond. Was he the James Bond iconic?
He was the first James Bond in the movie Dr. No.
Oh, wow. Wow. that surprised
And
me.
he played him for quite a while. There's been at least like 5, 6, 7 Bonds, I think. I lost count, but yeah, he was one of the first ones. And honestly,
So it's like, your name's Henry Jones Jr. We named the dog Indiana, of course. Let me shake my martinis for a second.
yeah.
Just a drink. A martini, shaken, not stirred.
No, he's the one that you always remember the Bond, James Bond, and and that's exactly what it
I
was.
didn't realize that was him. That is surprising to me. But yeah, Sean Connery. We did Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom reaction on YouTube earlier, and that was pretty fun. You should check it out after this, obviously.
Yeah.
What did help her finances was the 1956 remake of Imitation of Life, a name I feel like we talked about in Imitation of Life, which she persisted through despite the whole film being about a failing actress. Oof, that would have hurt her feelings a lot.
Well,
She's like, I'm acting out my life. Story of my life, man.
There are movies about. I mean, Sunset Boulevard is a movie about a failed actress played by an actress. So you're not playing your own failure. You're basically just portraying things that you've seen and things that you could feel, and you could place yourself, I think, more easily and readily into the part because you're an actress playing an actress. So you've either met somebody.
Astaire.
Yeah.
That's who I was thinking of. I was thinking of Fred Astaire
And Ginger Rogers.
and Ginger Rogers.
There
Like,
you go.
Yeah, I was thinking of somebody. Thank you so much, brain. I was like, oh, it's Fred Astaire. Thank you.
Yeah, and they work together in so many movies, and I agree. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn really did respect each other and their work. He respected her work before he got to know her on a personal level.
Yes,
so that's very good.
I would relate those two to Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
Nice
But
nice
yeah,
one.
the 1959 remake of Imitation of Life made millions, and she got financial success from that, despite having to pay a wrongful death lawsuit. It was pretty hefty, at least if adjusted for inflation. $750,000 was like a lot.
That's
anyway,
quite a bit.
Later, she acted in popular 1970s TV shows such as Falcon's Crest and The Survivors, not to be confused with Survivor,
yeah.
which came out probably like more toward 1990s.
That's a 2000s show.
And then she was in her final film, the comedy horror Witch's Brew. And then she died due to throat cancer, just like Lon Chaney, I think. Actually, we were talking about that
Senior.
in Fan of the Opera 1925.
Senior, yeah.
Lon Chaney Sr. died through throat cancer coming into the sound era and was diminishing in that respect. But she died a smoker, sadly.
A lot of these actors did, and it became this way of assuaging their nerves, kind of calming their nerves, and it just got into a habit. And everybody smoked in Hollywood. It was just a thing, and only till later people were like, "Hey, smoking's really bad, and you can get throat cancer." And then they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, right," and then you die of it.
So we're gonna get to a couple more shorter entries in this list. Ian Hunter as John Lanyon was actually King Richard in The Adventures of Robin Hood. I did not realize that. Maybe you talked about him a bit more in that episode.
Oh right,
maybe.
King Richard, the one he was in disguise.
Yeah, so he probably talked about Ian Hunter a bit more there. Probably not. That was a fairly short production in consideration to the massive plot that we had. Or actually, I think we had it was the opposite, more of a production than a plot. But still, everyone knows the plot to Robin Hood, so.
Right.
Yeah. Barton McLean is Sam Higgins. I don't remember Sam Higgins.
Sam Higgins was the guy who had the accident in the gas explosion in the mine or whatever. It's called the mine.
Right.
He lost his mind.
He was in Maltese Falcon as Lieutenant Dundee. Probably a pretty famous role.
It's a side
I believe
role.
he gives.
It's a side role.
I believe he gives Humphrey Bogart a letter in the Maltese Falcon.
Oh wow.
He was also Pat McCormick in Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Oh.
We'll see him in The Mummy's Ghost, and he was the villain in the 9th and 11th Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan. I did not know that series was that extensive, but there is at least 11 entries.
It goes for quite a while.
We're getting Final Fantasy up in here, like.
Wow.
The Weissmuller Tarzans, and we reviewed one of them. So
there's quite a few, and in the Tarzan episode we did talk, and
that's probably getting into the 1950s cringe era that Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan had.
Yeah, well, nobody's really watched or listened to our Tarzan YouTube episode at all. It's not really getting in that many hits at all.
Yeah, nearly
a
20,000 views.
Yeah.
It's totally laudable.
That's nothing to swing at.
Nothing to swing at. Actually, while we're mentioning views on YouTube, our Robin Hood episode has reached 1,000 views as
Not
of
bad.
now.
Not bad.
I think it's 1,000. It's 1.1K, I believe, as of current. That's pretty respectable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's our first episode to reach 100K after Tarzan just blowing it out of the water.
Well, nice. These
C.
classic
Smith
heroes.
as Bishop Manners was Jane's dad, James Parker, in Tarzan the Ape Man.
These connections are crazy. These connections to things we've seen before that we don't remember.
Like, for instance, Frederick Warlock as Dr. Heath was the voice of Horace in 101 Dalmatians. I believe we talked about someone being the narrator in 101 Dalmatians before.
Horace was one of the bad guys, yeah.
Yeah, Horace was, he was, Cruella de Vil's, like, sort of henchman. I believe he was one of two.
Yes, there's
Henchmans, I
two
believe.
guys. One super skinny guy and one kind of...
And guess what? We've got another Tarzan the Ape Man dude. Forrester Harvey is Old Prouty in this movie. I don't remember Old Prouty in this movie, but
I don't
he
either.
was Beamish in Tarzan the Ape Man and its sequel, Tarzan Jane. Herbert Hall, the bartender husband, I believe, in The Invisible Man. He was Ben Jenkins in The Invisible Man Returns. We talked about him, probably talked about him there too. Honesty Nuttall in Captain Blood with Errol Flynn, who was in Adventures of Robin Hood. He was an extra in the Bulldog Drummond movies, which we mentioned in our Invisible Woman episode, and he was. We will see him as Twiddle in The Wolfman.
Aha!
Which is actually, I'm pretty sure that's our next episode, if not after that.
Yes, it's our next episode, The Wolfman.
The Wolfman will be exciting for Dan.
I cannot wait for you to see it because it's probably the most iconic, werewolf movie ever made. All the other ones that exist are really just nipping at its clawed heels. So. And
finally, I wrote down in the notes here Percy Reginald Lawrence Grant as that colonial dude. That colonial dude. I don't remember his name actually, but it's Wikipedia. But I don't remember that dude. Is that colonial dude? Who's a colonel? Yes, exactly. He had supporting roles in The Living Ghost, 1942. I'll Tell the World, 1934. Shanghai Express, 1932. The Mask of Fu Manchu, 1932. We talked about some Fu Manchu movies. This is probably one of the first ones. And Son of Frankenstein, 1939. Yep. So that is all I have, actually, really. It was a wild ride of lots of different things. We will definitely have more comparisons to come. I've been trying to save them for a bit more for our next segment. Although, again, we have made some comparisons into this one, which I don't know. I was just like, maybe we want to save some, but actually, maybe I'm just being a bit stupid. But yeah, we'll have definitely some more talking comparison talk as we'll have in our plot section, which is going to be real fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Jekyll and Hyde is just like, I described it in our earlier episode as it was Paramount's Frankenstein at the time. It was like, you have Frankenstein and you have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It was really this classic horror monster that really paralleled Frankenstein's success for Paramount. And Adolf Zukor Presents was at the top of the Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde. I remember that Adolf Zukor was one of the founders of Paramount. They didn't really have that in this movie, though, funnily enough. They didn't present it by Adolf Zukor anymore. But that's just a little tiny nugget of what we're about to talk about next. So do you have anything else to say about this movie?
Well, what I can tell you is that I think that it tried, and it got the story across, and it's watchable. I do think there's a couple moments that I was surprised by, that we'll talk about in the plot section. But ultimately, the one that I prefer is the 1931 version. I think we all figured that out.
Me too.
Yeah.
And a lot of some people prefer this version, and it's understandable with, like, that human hide, that MGM production value, that sheen that's on every 1940s movie, basically, we've been seeing. Even, like, Universal changed their logo to have, like, this crystals to show all the gleaming that you could get from 1940s lighting. It's just something about the cameras. Anyway, I love it. But yeah, and they were talking about how that Hyde is sort of, like, better in their mind's eyes, especially, of course, I talked about the image and the silhouette of that we get from Hyde is partially influenced by this movie.
Yes.
And sort of built this imagining of what Hyde would be in of course, popular culture. And we wouldn't have, like, Jekyll and Hyde at all without the both of these movies, honestly. I feel like both of them are historically very important. Don't rag on one to put your inferior movie up if you're a new studio out there talking to you. But to summarize, yeah, I would say that in terms of preferring, I would definitely say that the first one and this one, they both have some elements that you can go, for. But as I said, in the first one, there's really some elements, there's things that they have, there's stuff that the 1931 movie has going for it that this movie really doesn't.
Right.
So, while it is a pretty good movie, definitely, also, we were talking about pacing was an issue, maybe because we were tired, but there were some long talking scenes with absolute silence, nothing really going on, and really drew on, which was a weakness of this movie in comparison to the previous movie. Feels like they comparatively wasted 2 hours that they had. It just feels like an emptier movie in general than Jekyll and Hyde was. So, but that's all summarizing. Both of them are pretty great. I would definitely prefer the previous version. It has a lot of strengths to it. It's sort of in that classic horror era where everything was popping, you know? What do you think?
I think that... You're talking about liking this one or no? What do you mean?
Do you like it in general?
I do. It's watchable. I do like it. I do think it's a little bit long than I would want, but it's not one of those movies where it's like, oh, it's just the acting is terrible. I don't think the acting is terrible. I think it misses the mark. It doesn't, it's not as memorable, I think, as the one, when I think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think of the 31 one. Any other portrayals, I'm kind of like, okay, they're fine,
So overall, not as great or iconic as the previous one. So we will leave you on that. And next time we'll have my beautiful, odious father doing the plot of the movie, which, as I said, will be a lot of different comparisons in comparison to the previous movie. We'll hopefully have enough comparison points to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
There will be, like, we're going to be doing all the analysis and talk about, like, script differences, plot differences.
Thematic materials, yeah.
How much do they spend on this scene in comparison to the original movie? Like, I'm interested to figure out. And we're going to be doing this podcast episode all about it for you. So, until then, we'll give you a little break music, and then we'll hop right back into it. Hey y'all, and welcome to the podcast. Yet again, we are doing, of course, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm going to sort of bring in the historical basis, like the basis for which the story, the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, is based off of the
Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
So firstly, I want to mention the Victorian ideals, which were that they claimed morality and piousness, which made them hypocrites. And they questioned their
hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy. They questioned this, that, the goodness that they saw themselves in, compared to the church's beliefs of, that this is a sin. They were like, oh, are we really that good if the things that are we really good people if the church says otherwise? Another thing they thought, science, which in this case was in the form of Darwinism, was threatening religion. And especially we'd see that in this movie, definitely it is the Victorian ideals and science threatening religion. Obviously, you don't get this in the 1930s, as we will see with Dad's plot summary after I give this basis.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention was Italian criminologist Cesare Lombostro. I believe I've spelled that correctly. Cesare Lombostro is known for his theory of criminal atavism, or the born criminal. Criminality was attributed by physical signs, like lopsided faces, low foreheads, large jaws or cheekbones. Basically what Hyde looks like in the 1930s.
Right.
Hyde. And this one too, though not to as much as extent. Also to mention, of course, I was talking about earlier, the vision of Hyde, bolting down the streets of London in a black cape and cane and hat. It is very similar to, the Jack the Ripper. There's a Jack the Ripper-esque, image
Right.
to see there. And Jack the Ripper, of course, was a man about the same time, about the 1800s, who was, he was seen like as a commoner, but he was not great toward the woman.
He murdered 4 or 5 prostitutes, I believed.
Yes. Also to mention, like, how criminals are judged by how they look is the golden ratio, which was, it can be used for paintings and stuff, like with Leonardo da Vinci, but it can also be used for, images of faces. The golden ratio is, the ratio to measure to make a face look beautiful or pretty, something to look beautiful or pretty, good to the eye. It originates from the Greek mathematicians' study of, pentagons, which was dominated by Euclid and Pythagoras, and then on to Fibonacci. His numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, converges to the golden ratio, and also to mention Kepler, who studied polyhedrons in relation to astronomy and planetary motion, and polyhedrons implement the golden ratio as well.
And plus, they're fun to play role-playing games with.
Yeah.
I was waiting.
Polyhedrons are great.
I was waiting for you to say that. No, go ahead.
And then second to lastly, also to mention is Sigmund Freud. Have you heard of Sigmund Freud?
Oh, of course I have. Yes.
Yes.
Famous psychologist.
Yes, he was also in the 1850s, along with the people we're mentioning here, as The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was made in the 1850s. He was an Australian neurologist.
Welcome to Australia.
Austrian.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Austrian. An Austrian neurologist who was known for the theory of psychoanalysis. The concept was a method of therapy that aimed to bring unconscious thoughts and emotions into conscious awareness. And he believed that unconscious conflicts and repressed desires greatly influenced human behavior. Through techniques such as free association, dream analysis, he was trying to uncover sort of this. And he made the 3 model part of the mind, which was the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. Argued that the unconscious mind, consisting of repressed memories and desires, had a significant impact on an individual's thoughts and actions, often conflicting with conscious desires. We're seeing this here with, Jekyll is the conscious, while Hyde is the unconscious desires.
The common words that I use is that he used is the ego, the superego, and the id. That's what I remember. Yeah.
The id was the repressed instincts, and it's the id is what he called it. It operates according to the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification, and of course the ego, which mediates between the id and the demands of reality, and the superego, which represents the moral standards of society. Yeah, this all leads into the role of the unconscious and the influence of human behavior, which is exemplified in this movie. And there's also the concept of defense mechanisms, which individuals were employing to protect themselves from anxiety and distress, which is repression, denial, displacement, transference. We sort of see, like Hyde, and also with the Victorian ideals, they were sort of pushing away. They had a moral standard. They had a standard to upkeep, which, as we see in these 2 movies, or especially the first one, he mentions that Jekyll mentions it outright. He has an image to keep. He's gotta look good on the outside. He's gotta upkeep, a good image of himself as a fellow Victorian, and that was the Victorian part of Victorian ideals, which, of course, they were, pushing away and denying the fact that of sin in everyday human beings.
Also, do you remember, there's another part that's in this movie, is you get some of the commentary from the father, Sir Charles. There's a part where he says, don't go off on all these, these newfangled ideas. They're heresy. They're blasphemous. Whatever. They're crazy. What you need to do is just do regular doctor stuff. Because we run in certain social circles and stuff. He also said, there's a part where he kisses her hand or does something kind of silly, kind of romantic like, and he's like, seriously, sir, hold back your, your childish notions. He wants everything to have decorum and everything to be in its place, and it totally goes with the Victorian ideal of everybody keep everything quiet, keep it under wraps, don't ever repress everything, and then it's just bound to explode.
Yeah, keep a moral upstanding. And also there's the Freudian slips, which Freudian believed that accidental slips of the tongue and also the dreams of the patient could provide, valuable insights into the individual's unconscious. And that the manifestation of the unconscious in these ways could reveal hidden thoughts and emotions within them.
Yes.
And, of course, in this movie, we see he has wild dreams.
Yeah, those are the hallucinogenic scenes. Yeah, like when he's taking. There's a couple times when he's taking it, and you can definitely see that there's an uncorking of a bottle.
Yeah, I don't. We'll get to
Yeah.
it when we get to it, but it is crazy.
Yeah.
Also to mention a person who was around the same time as Stevenson was growing up, who's Deacon Brody. His name is William Brody. He's a cabinet maker who led a double life as a skilled burglar and a criminal mastermind.
Wow.
And Stephen had written a play about him as Brody was local to Edinburgh, which was his home country. And of course, Edinburgh is, I believe it's the capital of Scotland.
Yeah, I think it was in Scotland, yes.
And, sort of the urban terrors that plagued Victorian England with, of course, mentioning Jack the Ripper. This was well in his mind as a sort of inspiration for this.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's really the background of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I'm glad to share, some of the thought processes of how, this came to be. That was really interesting.
Well, the thing that I'm glad about is that you exposed yourself to a lot of the psychoanalysis and all the stuff like that about the mind, because I don't know of any other time where we would just be going la-di-da through our day and just start talking about Sigmund Freud, and that's part of the cool thing about this podcast is that you go into kind of the backgrounds of the science behind the science fiction. And
then you go, polyhedrons. Wait, what podcast am I in? You're in a podcast that's better than all the other podcasts because we talk about polyhedrons and other interesting stuff.
Yeah, no politics, just polyhedrons.
Exactly. So let's actually get into the movie, which begins with a gravestone as a backdrop.
It goes into a church. See, the 1931...
Well,
yeah.
I wanted to mention that in this movie, it's just this flat light gray square. While in the 1936, it's this striking dark gray... like how nice fancy wooden dressers are curved? Like the tops of like
like the
chairs,
filigree, the kind of that well-designed kind of look to it, yeah.
Like the curves and then like the squares at the end. Sort of like that carved into it. And the background music is Staccato and Fugue, which while being a weird choice is, it's the vampire song, which is strange because they use Swan Lake in Dracula instead of this, which is funny.
Right.
It does bring me back to when these old movies used classical pieces rather than composing pieces. But yeah, in this movie, it was Frank Waxman grand music that interludes into this huge choir section, sort of a la Things to Come a little bit. And we'll mention how the choir comes back. It's sort of the end of Things to Come. If you get what I mean. So
the 1931 Jekyll and Hyde, it started with this preparation to go to a place of higher learning and rationality, aka the university, right? And the 1941 version starts with a spiritual location, a church, in 1887 London, England.
Yeah, religion is the theme and not science.
Yeah, well, there's some religion does peek its way in now and again. It even ends with something religious, and we'll talk about that at the end. But
because they're probably feeling like, it's sort of it's not mentioning God at all, and religion and stuff, and not having that basis. They probably wanted to butter up to the code and be like,
Oh yeah.
And also, the Victorian ideals and the. It's also they probably got more into that stuff, and they do mention Victoria in this film. They don't really mention Victoria in the previous film.
We naturally turn our thoughts towards that way of life as exemplified by Victoria, our beloved Queen. For this week begins Her Majesty's Golden Jubilee.
No, that's right. There's the Queen's Jubilee or something at the time, yeah.
The 1930s is beginning with him playing Toccata and Fugue in his organ. His head is swaying, impossibly. It's this first-person shot of him getting ready, going into the auditorium on a carriage.
That's it's very striking, but they definitely they're very traditional, I think, with this movie. It's in some of those shots.
Yeah, and they gloat. He's a nutcase. He gives a speech about as scientists we should peer beyond the London smog.
London is so full of fog that it has penetrated our minds, set boundaries for our vision.
Instead of doctor work today, he's going to present the soul is not one, but truly two.
My analysis of this soul, the human psyche, leads me to believe that man is not truly one, but truly two.
Is the line. I believe
yes.
It's from the book as well. The noble side and the earth-binded impulsive side. And of course, free the good self for future human achievement, and the bad side will fulfill itself. The epic strategy. I'm gonna sell you some snake oil.
Yeah. Well, at the very beginning, it starts with it starts in a church. And
the very beginning of this
1941,
does start a church.
And there is a guy there who is
Bishop Manners.
Well, Bishop.
Oh, you're mentioning Sam Higgins.
Bishop Manners is talking. Yes, he's talking about
Bishop Manners is like talking about
the Queen's Jubilee is coming up. Yeah,
the Queen's Jubilee is under the assumption of goodness in our hearts. We despise evil. To quote, we naturally turn our hearts toward that way of life. It's, going like, we're not evil people. We believe in God. Yes, amazing.
Yeah, and this guy named Sam Higgins, he just pipes up and he says, evil wiped out, eh?
Evil wiped out, eh? And may we not live for the day.
Take all the fun out of life, eh, Bishop?
Surely,
Get out, Beelzebub.
the character of this realm and its people.
Yeah.
So
and he's not talking about, like, the forces of good have overcomes evil will be wiped out. About Queen Victoria? Her Jubilee, apparently? And they're like, she grew up amidst flesh, but the forces of evil have overcome it.
Well, they're trying to say that she was a representative of the morality and the better way, and it, again, we have, she's the Queen Mum. I mean, of course she is. All right, so now,
of course, yes, Sam Higgins is laughing in strong agreement, and he says it would take the fun out of life.
Yeah, so he's played by Barton McLean, and he only shows up in like a couple of scenes. But in this scene, he's yelling out and saying all this kind of crazy stuff, and he gets escorted out, because you don't want to bother everybody. And there's a doctor who follows him out, and this is Dr. Henry Jekyll, played by Spencer Tracy. He questions the man's mother. And I'm pretty sure that I thought she was his wife for a second, but then later on I was like, okay, wait a minute, this is my son, and I'm like, oh, this is the mother, obviously. So this guy Sam Higgins, he went insane went evil basically after suffering a gasworks explosion.
Has he been like this before?
It's been getting worse since the explosion.
Shock.
Instead of taking him to the police, though, they decide they're going to take him to the hospital instead, based upon Dr. Jekyll's suggestion.
Jekyll wants to take him off their hands. He's like, yeah, we'll just put him in the hospital instead. I'll get to him. It's cool, man.
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll is there with his...
And he returns to the service.
Yeah.
And, of course, he's with his girlfriend, B.
Fiancée, Beatrix, B, yeah, played by Lana Turner. Lana Turner was a big, leading lady kind of actress. In terms of, I would say, in terms of performance, I'm not saying that I think that Ingrid Bergman does a better job at the part of Ivy Pearson than Miriam Hopkins did in the 1931 version, but I do think she is given much more to do. If you look at Ingrid Bergman and her character and what she's given to do and what Beatrix is given to do, there's not really any kind of comparison. Has a whole lot more dramatic meat to chew on. But anyway, back to this.
So you're saying that Lana Turner is versus Miriam Hopkins? You say Lana Turner's better?
No, Lana Turner played the fiancée.
Right.
And Ingrid Bergman played Ivy Pearson, and Miriam Hopkins was Ivy Pearson in the 1931 version.
Okay, thanks for ruining all of our brains.
I love ruining brains. So no, I was saying
too many names.
I was saying in comparison with Lana Turner's performance, Lana Turner does okay with what she's given. It's fine, but with Ivy Pearson, you get all these different emotions and different dramatic takes. That you get to do. So I kind of understand why Ingrid Bergman wanted that part instead of Lana Turner getting it. because there was so much more to chew on, and it was not your traditional good girl kind of role.
It wasn't her typecast.
Exactly, and she did get typecast a lot as the Lana Turner type as well. So she wanted to kind of go a little different. So, they are heading out. Beatrix's father is played by Donald Crisp. I think his name is Sir Charles. Anyway, they're both leaving, and Beatrix accuses her father of being too big on decorum and being pompous.
My dear Beatrice, I'm a very broad-minded man, as you know, but I do wish Harry wouldn't make such demonstrations of affection in public, even if you are going to marry him.
Now, Father, darling, don't be pompous.
It's kind of because he calls Dr. Jekyll on how he's kind of romantic and stuff in public.
That's when but that's sort of as they're talking in the carriage.
Yes.
As of course, B is sort of kissing. Jekyll and B are sort of kissing up to each other, and B is like, "Don't be late for the dinner," and they drive off.
Boy.
And her father's very uncomfortable with their lovey-doveyness. He's also like tired feeling. And
so Jekyll,
my notes.
Jekyll wants to.
Herbert Hobbs as General Danvers Carew in the 1931 version is very vocal in antagonizing Jekyll and his relationship with his daughter Muriel, while Donald Crisp as Sir Charles Emery in this movie is very much softer about the matter.
He's more subtle,
He's subtle, more reserved. He doesn't mention tradition. He doesn't mention tradition as much in this one.
Right.
At all, really.
So Jekyll, he doesn't go into detail about his thoughts about the good and evil in man. He kind of gives a hint at it, but he does say that
it gets pushed off till later.
Yeah, there's a dinner party where he really goes into all his theories. But what he's doing is he wants to use the man Sam as a test for the experiments. He's in the hospital. Will have nothing of it until the theories are proved further. He says we have to have courage and not ethics to take a gamble on this. Of course, the man's mother is nearby when he's saying all this stuff.
Why, after all, the man's a human being.
You mean he was a human being? And he might be again if you'd keep your hidebound ethics out of this?
You can't experiment on human beings.
I noted down that Sam is speaking like a gremlin.
Oh.
It's funny. He's speaking it like a gremlin. He's like, "Oh, you want to tell her what I think, yeah."
Yeah, exactly.
Not like Hyde voice, but like very gremlin-y.
He's like Golluming up at the joint, yeah.
But Jekyll says it's ever growing his greatest case yet to Dr. Heath, I believe.
Yes. And you can't experiment on human beings. You can only experiment on animals, and not one animal.
Yeah, he's like, it may be in the scope of your research. He says, Jekyll says, I'll cure him with the cure that was tested with the animals. Jekyll says it might not work. It's dangerous. Jekyll doesn't care for Dr. Heath's ethics. And Sam was a human being. And he also talks about, you need courage to gamble in the daring.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, Dr. Jekyll comes home, and he's got that butler Poole, played by Peter Godfrey, of course, just like the other version.
Good afternoon, sir. Just in time for tea, sir. I'll be bound you had no lunch, sir.
Well, he stomps off toward his home after
this
conversation. He's like, you're dealing with unmentionable deeds. And Lanyon also does appear there. He's like, wants to be in it. He's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm alright. The bull's out of the China shop. And he's like, I'll be with you forever. Or I'll be with you, China or no China.
Right.
He's sort of like, I'll be there on your side when you do these experiments.
Right. So when he gets back to his house, he's obsessive, and he's in that mode where Jekyll gets in this mode where he doesn't eat. Poole keeps trying to give him a sandwich. He checks in on this rat and this rabbit, and they're both dead at that point. And he's like, back to the drawing board. Next scene is at this dinner, right? Some individuals from the medical establishment are hosting. There's also
Oh, wow. Wait, sorry. I had comparisons to make. I didn't
okay. Where do you...
Okay. I wanted to say, about the same time they're doing the Sam Higgins stuff. Jekyll is in the free wards. And, of course, Lanyon summoned him as the dinner is starting soon. But Jekyll says he'll be there just for the dancing. Why can't you get a house surgeon? His patient flinches to that. He says, Jekyll is like, no, just make my excuses. And he makes the excuses. So he's down in the free ward at this time, but in this, he doesn't really do anything with the hospital. He's just interested in Sam Higgins in particular.
Yeah, it doesn't show his ability to help other people. You know, like the little girl going, "I can walk, sir.
I can walk, sir.
Of course you can.
I can walk, sir.
I'm walking, sir." You remember that?
Yeah. Also to note, of course, is going over through this is that Friedrich March's performance. He's got this flowery, like, poetic speech when he talks in many different scenes that is not here when Spencer Tracy is having a go at it.
Right.
So it makes the first movie more iconic in a way. I can remember a lot of details about the first movie and not so much the second movie.
Yeah.
Because, man, I was surprised how much I remembered of it. I was like, oh, all the lines and stuff, man.
Also, they're kind of checking off boxes. They're doing their own thing, and I'm not saying that they are, that they're doing a terrible job. It's just not as memorable. I think that as you were going through your comparisons, did you notice that one movie was just got across the point a lot quicker and with less scenes? I mean, that's how I feel.
The 1930s version, at least the one that we watched, ran 1 hour and 35 minutes. This one runs 12 minutes more, probably like 48 minutes, 1 hour 48. And that's probably due to some scenes being much longer with some more talking with, like, Ivy. And they add different various scenes and story beats that weren't in the original. So, yeah, we were saying about pacing. Yeah, pacing is a little bit more than, the Jekyll and Hyde, which is just snappy on everything. But I could say it's not that much worse than the previous one, since it's only 12 extra minutes. I mean, that sounds like
I did notice some things. Like, we'll get there. But I was talking about, like, the parts where Frederick March as Hyde would, like, be quicker with his torturing and his pushing of Ivy. In the other one, he's just very like, well, let's stay here at home. He talks like more whispery, and he's as Spencer Tracy does. I mean, as Hyde, he's more whispery.
Spencer Tracy as Hyde is just like he's a lot of the time spent that Hyde spends in the previous movie, talking about your bird. And, the bullying, backwards way bullying into, like, doing the things, and the things that he sort of brings up is a lot different from the Hyde in this movie.
Right.
And in this way, a lot of that is just staring at her, especially in the first many scenes that we see Hyde and Ivy interact.
Yeah.
He's just staring at her. It's sort of getting the same point across.
He says less, but I don't know if it's...
He's just creepy. The previous one is actually like he could be a threat, as we see in the bar in 1930s version. He says he's not someone to be trifled with. In this one, not really.
He looks like he could actually eat someone,
Yeah, Ivy in 1930 was struck pink by that, and so that she would go there. But the reason in this one is in the bar scene as we get later than we are right now is that, he wants a bottle of the boil, and she goes, oh, bubbly, and go get it. That's the reason. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
The dinner.
So let's go back to the dinner. So, like I said, some people in the medical establishment were there, plus Sir Charles and Beatrix, but also some religious people as well. Of course, Jekyll is late again. Once he gets there, they have some interesting conversations on the subject matter of his experiments and his theories. There's some individuals there of high society, some physicians who take care of even Her Majesty Queen Victoria. And
I believe Bishop Manners himself.
Yeah, I think he's there too.
Is there too.
So you get a lot of pushback on those theories, right? The priest has some notions that it's God's purview of good and evil, and it's God's realm to deal with.
Yeah, Jekyll, whatever, Trickle. Yeah, the conversation everyone gets to is like, your experiments about separating the brain. Jekyll is like, no, rather it's the soul. Bishop Manners then jokes it would invade my territory. And Jekyll is like, of course we wouldn't object as science could aid the church.
All right, then, call it the soul.
The soul? Come, my dear doctor. Now you're invading my territory.
Well, I suppose I am, sir, but I know that you, for one, wouldn't object if science could be of some assistance to the church.
Instead of, presenting it to a bunch of students, that, I noted them down as Draco Malfoy clones.
Right.
Because a lot of them were in that, scene where they're walking out of the university.
Yes.
In the previous film.
Yes.
Instead, it's like inspiration for the church. I guess. It's gonna help the church and get inspiration from that, I guess.
Well, he says
this one, it makes more sense in that way.
He says, is it right to tamper with
the problem until the Creator himself has solved it in his own mysterious way.
So basically, you're messing in God's domain.
Yeah, there's a higher source to help with, good men aren't necessarily sinless. Everyone wants to keep back, something to himself. The desires in their heart they want to keep to themselves. There's a higher source that can help with that, not you. They sort of interrupt this with inquires to, elaborate about the experiment, but they have secretly planted across, getting across the same points without the code noticing is that Jekyll is competing against God. There's because he dropped that there's a higher source to do with that, not you, but. Jekyll is like, well, yeah, but I'm gonna, and then he gets interrupted.
Yeah, and they try to change the subject. The conversation gets a little heated. It's kind of like when you're at a Thanksgiving dinner and somebody mentions who they voted for.
Jekyll does mention, as in the 1930s, that the two sides are chained together.
Yes.
To free the good side to go to higher destiny, which is, godliness, and segregate the bad, which is interesting, then just let it deal with itself, slowly pass away.
And what's really uncomfortable is the ride home. I mean, Beatrix is, they're going back to Beatrix's dad's house for a nightcap, which I'm assuming is like a little bit of alcohol before you go to sleep, which is weird. But since nobody really drives themselves anywhere, I guess it's okay to drink. So they head back to Beatrix's dad's house. It's a very uncomfortable cab ride. And when they get there, there's a music box and a painting of Sir Charles's former wife.
The music box is the waltz, which was the last kind of dance he had with his wife. So
it inspired them to kind of cut a rug. Him and Beatrix, Jekyll and Beatrix, and they go outside in the conservatory or whatever you want to call it, and they talk. They have a little love talk.
Kiss.
Yeah,
just a tiny little love talk. But in the 1930s, this was a dance, like a full-on dance with everybody.
Oh yeah, it was huge. It was huge. It was like.
It was a huge
20
dance.
different people dancing, yeah.
They dance away into the garden and, profess love for each other.
I don't think you love me seriously.
Oh, I love you better than that. I love you gaily, happily, high-hearted. I love you so much that I could laugh and sing and... Oh, I shouldn't spoil it by trying to sing.
It's much longer than this one. They just immediately... It's because,
they're checking boxes.
1930s... Yeah, in the 1930s... he's sort of establishing his relationship with Muriel
Carew, yeah.
When this one, B and Jekyll are already, lovebirds already. So there's nothing really too much to establish. So they just immediately cut to, the kiss. And then getting interrupted by the dad.
Yeah, his dad comes out. He wants to have a conversation alone with him.
For the music book. And also to, calmly ask if he's in love with her for earnest. And then he says their relationship is harebrained. Because the experiments are getting in the way.
In my opinion, the whole thing is harebrained.
Well, the experiments were harebrained. He's okay with him being with her, but he wants to be able to count on him. He says you got to have something to be counted upon, and not some crazy notions. You've got to stick with the regular medical stuff.
Develop your practice. Cultivate the circle in which you and Beatrice shall move.
He mentions social circles and being able to provide. So honestly, his focus is more about what it looks like in society.
Yeah, General Carew in the previous one is a lot more blunt about this. He's, Jekyll, you're impatient and eccentric.
Is this another evidence of your eccentricity? If it is eccentric to be impatient in love, sir, I am.
Which is positively indecent, so no, you can't marry. Which was the thing, you have to keep up tradition. You must marry only at my anniversary. He's very stingy for that.
Yeah, he's a little bit more hardcore, I think, even than Sir Charles is. I have to admit. So after that, Lanyon, of course, like we mentioned before, played by Ian Hunter, and Dr. Jekyll, they head out, and Dr. Jekyll bemoans the fact that he'll have to spend his life diagnosing measles and mumps and whooping cough.
Seems I must discontinue my research. Spend the rest of my life diagnosing measles, mumps, and whooping cough, or encounter his serious disapproval.
And so they decide to go down to the bar for a wee nip of whiskey. On the way there, they see a young lady being attacked and manhandled in a horrible manner. This is Ivy Pearson, played by Ingrid Bergman. This is very...
And then in a matter of seconds, Jekyll rips the accoster away from her, and the accoster runs.
They chase him off, and they can't get him. He's gone too fast, too far. So this is very...
Yeah, although about this time in the 1930s,
version, yeah.
Is Jekyll and Lanyon are walking and talking on the street going home from the dance, and he's, Jekyll is like, wait, I want to strangle him.
The pity I didn't strangle the old walrus. Did you hear him? Wait.
And he's talking about the love, and, wants to be drunk on love, and, he's also arguing against Lanyon's talk of borders to keep by using the invention of the street lamp as an example. And, of course, he is interrupted by Ivy being accosted and rescuing her. The scene is much longer spent on that than in this movie.
Yeah, and they chase him off. They escort Ivy back to her home. Ivy appears to be a little bit smitten by the good doctor, and even though she's not too hurt, she feigns a little bit of pain, so he'll take care of her a little bit. This is very similar to the other one, except she keeps mostly her clothes on. So they get back to Ivy's house, and the doctor is talked into carrying her up the stairs. I had this feeling from Frederick March's version that he was a little bit more, you could see a little bit more of the lusty eyes, kind of thing. But with Spencer Tracy, you can't see it as much, even though he does kiss her.
Yeah, he doesn't fall for her as soon as Frederick March as Jekyll does for Ivy in the 1930s.
Right, but of course, I think he's holding back because of the code.
The difference with this movie, other of course than playing out generally and being probably much longer due to the amount of dialogue. Jekyll is a bit more on the initiative at the start with, are you gonna let down your blouse so I can look at your wounds? She laughs pretty long about him being a doctor. That's some extension. Of course, no first-person shots of looking long at the leg and while taking off the garters.
The garter, yeah.
I just mentioned the garters cutting off of circulation in the previous movie too.
He does take it with him, as a gift.
Yeah, she pays for seeing her with the garter, which is, I believe, was not something in the 1930s.
I think the garter was here's your payment. I give you the garter itself.
Yeah, which is a new introduction.
Of course, she's hurt by the fact that he is not falling for her.
And Ivy immediately stops Jekyll at the door when Lanyon steps in. And in the previous one, they were both in the bed, about the kiss.
Yeah.
And then she doesn't stop him.
So after Jekyll heads out, he does tell Lanyon that he is going to be non-stop in the lab until he solves this problem of evil and good.
Well, don't you think you'd run less personal risk if you confined your experiments to the laboratory?
That's where you'll find me from tonight on, until I get what I'm looking for.
So we get him going straight into it. A montages of beakers and chemicals.
While we are going sort of past that, sorry to break a little
No, it's okay.
Little bit of momentum you gained was that Lanyon's joking the incident was the evil winning over his soul, and Jekyll blows off as an attack, which is interesting because after this sort of, he's basically in the other one, he's like, so what, that I love her. It's adorable. It's that, and then Lanyon is like, haven't you forgotten Muriel existing? And he's like, how can I forget water? But then he says, how can a man when a man doesn't drink water? How can he forget?
Yeah,
water,
it's using
needs,
a terminology, different terminology for something else. Yeah.
Which he's saying that how he feel when he's denied water. Then he's gonna get water somewhere else.
Yeah, they don't really go into it.
Being denied the water.
They don't really go into that with the 41 version. Due to the 41, code,
they don't say that.
It kind of loses its punch.
It's an attack. He actually admits, that it's evil winning over his soul, but it's just an attack. In the previous one, he's like, no, it's just normal. Exactly.
Right. So okay. So go back to the lab. All right. Back to the lab. He's feeding his formula to this nasty, ill-tempered rat and this docile, calm rabbit. He finds out that the rabbit, after that, is ill-tempered and nasty, and the rat is lovely and docile. Again, Dr. Jekyll is late to whatever high society impress the fiancé situation that he was supposed to go into. I think it may have been the theater, I don't remember. But Dr. Jekyll goes to the hospital with his medical kit and potion because he's like, oh, it works. The formula works. But the patient he wants to give it to, sadly, has passed away. And this is Sam Higgins, the guy who went a little Looney Tunes in the church, right? If only Dr. Jekyll had been allowed to experiment while this man was still alive. But the pesky medical establishment, So on his way home, he muses that it might be a good thing to experiment on himself, but he does it in kind of a different. He talks to this a constable, police officer.
If you had a balloon that could carry a man to Mars, and the pilot you had picked suddenly disappeared, would you get in the balloon yourself and cast off?
I don't know that I wouldn't have a go at it.
Fair enough, Mr. Weller, fair enough.
Which sort of, he's like, yeah, this is normal. I'm gonna take that balloon that was abandoned by God and, ascend to Mars.
Yeah, I'm going to experiment on myself. If he had asked the cop, hey, should I experiment on myself with some kind of crazy formula? He'd be like, no, sir, don't do that.
Yeah, don't trust anything that is made in a lab. It could easily be poisonous unless you're absolutely sure of it. That's
right, kids. That's right, kids. So he writes a note. It's almost like in case this all goes pear-shaped and belly up, here's what, he writes it basically, an I love you note to his fiancée, Beatrix. So he gets the formula ready, he takes it. Some of the camera angles in these scenes are actually pretty good. I could see where the good cinematography award or nomination might come in, but some of the camera shots that were in this would have been really good to put in the 1930s version, but the 1930s version...
Yeah, that one didn't have as much, close-ups. Close-up wasn't a word, but in this there's montages of close-ups of the beakers. Of course, in this scene, he takes the serum, he tries to take the notes vainly, but then he falls to the floor, he has the visions. In the previous movie, of course, we see,
It was real-time, the real-time transformation.
The real-time transformation of turning
very
blue.
Good. That was very good.
The blue coloring was revealed by the camera to make him get darker.
That was very effective, and I think it did. This one did well with some of the, shots, but they never did anything like they did in the previous thing. Even though they could probably do a better version of it now in the 40s, they just kind of did this fading one thing into another, and I'm like, that's okay. All right.
And it is sort of along the same line of, strangeness, but in this one, it's a lot more strange and symbolic. In the previous one, it's like bringing up, of course, his loves, his two loves, and of course the words that he said about strangling, and what General Carew said and Lanyon said about...
This one is more dreamlike.
I found your conduct disgusting.
Positively indecent.
Look where he did to me.
Your conduct was disgusting. It isn't done. It isn't done. Strangle. Indecent.
Yeah, Jekyll blew that off as an instinct in that conversation.
This one has a dark horse and a white horse. The dark horse is Ivy with her dark hair, and the white horse is Beatrix with her blonde hair. And he's whipping both of them.
Visions of water lilies rising.
Yeah.
The girls are rising and falling into mud for some reason. Whipping horses that turn into the woman. And apparently what we took for breathing on watch was whispers of Hyde, according to Wikipedia, which is weird after this. But interesting thing is in the 1931s, he stares at a skeleton and he goes, oh, right, I should probably make a letter in case things go pear-shaped.
Yeah, so...
that was his inspiration instead of doing it just right. That's a bit funny.
Yeah, so now let's talk about how Hyde looks as opposed to at how Hyde looked in the 31 version. This one, the makeup is very slight and subtle, to be honest, and it starts getting more pronounced as his evil goes. That also is true in the 31 version. There is a progression of the makeup. It's like a deterioration of it, but it starts freaky and ends freakier in the 31 version. With this one, it starts kind of subtle. Like if you saw somebody that looked like Mr. Hyde does in this movie, you'd be like, okay,
yeah, as I said before,
creepy,
but
probably
barring the word drunk. I said drunk, creepy hobo. I just call him a creepy hobo because he doesn't really
Dr.
act
Jekyll and
drunk.
Mr. Hobo.
He's more creepy. Anyone who's drunk would probably be more.
So there's nasty. There's
the abuse,
his teeth.
Normal.
His teeth size does go up. I think that they do put some packing into his upper lip. Let's see, probably underneath his eyes and some darkening of his eyes. They kind of
wrinkles.
They crazy up his hair a little bit. So after he changes, his butler Poole hears him in there, and Jekyll has to then take the potion to transform himself back. This is very similar to what actually happened in the 31 version.
Who's there? Dr. Jekyll? Dr. Jekyll, sir. Is that you?
Except in this movie, it's a 40-second shot, which is much longer than it was in the previous, focused on him, to where he's, hesitating, he's gonna go towards...
And it's a very one-shot. There's some stuff where it's
there's
it's one
the
shot.
Space between the lab and the house. He's gonna go toward the house, but then he hesitates and goes back and then Jekyll is there. It's much longer of a shot focused on him. Probably give more girth toward him, more space for him to transform, which probably, maybe they were like, it makes sense for him to transform in 2 seconds. Let's give him like 30 more seconds to change.
Right. That's kind of the way they do the transformation sometimes can be kind of like, okay, come on, make it quicker. So Poole is there at the back door, and he says that Miss Beatrix is at the house for some reason. It shows that she like knew something was wrong, and so she just snapped up or something. I don't know. So I thought made a note that her spidey senses went off.
This scene ends with him looking at himself, but ripping the letter as compared to straight chucking it. I don't remember.
Yeah. He does rip it up. So Beatrix is concerned about Jekyll and thought that maybe you left me for good, and I think that's probably because he didn't come to the theater thing. So right after Beatrix comes in, Beatrix's father has followed her there and says, "This is very inappropriate."
But I'm not ashamed.
Then, my dear, I shall be for you, because I do understand.
And they says that they're going to go to the continent together. In the original, they said they're going to Bath. And I wonder if is that in France or is that another place in England?
They're going to Isle of Bon. Yeah, Monte Carlo.
Isle of Bon, yes.
And then Isle of Bon.
So they,
not just Bath, or not anywhere near Bath.
They're saying Bath, England. I was looking it up just now.
Yeah, I noted interestingly that he was offered sherry wine as compared to tea in the 1930s.
Oh, right. So basically, so they didn't go to Bath. They went beyond? No? Nothing? Boo. Okay. Yeah, hey, sorry. All right, so they're going to the continent, and she's going to have to leave. So Jekyll's going to be without Beatrix for a little while. He gets a note from her, and he's excited, thinking that she's going to come back. But no, they're going to another city because of Beatrix's father's health issues. He mentions gout later.
Your princess is in another French city.
Yeah, thank you. So Poole's...
They should have went to Monaco, but Monaco probably wasn't invented yet.
There was Monaco, yeah. It just wasn't big as it was during the 50s and 60s. So,
yeah, that was fun.
So Poole... I wonder if Poole does this in the first one, or 31, but if Poole would just kept his mouth shut, not say anything, but he's like...
They say there's a very interesting musical show at the Vanity Fair, sir. Very comical, you know, sir, and very daring, if you follow my meaning, sir.
And so he's like, I'm not going to go. And then he sees the garter that Ivy had given him as payment for helping him out earlier, and then he decides to mix up the potion. And then there's another hallucinogenic dream sequence where it looks like Jekyll is corking up a wine bottle with Beatrix inside of it, and he's uncorking a wine bottle with the cork being Ivy's head, and there's this explosion. So there's a lot of imagery here of that, and he becomes Hyde.
Oh yeah, yes, to on your point of Poole, I feel like that is different. He's actively mentioning it in the Poole in the 1931 doesn't really outright. I feel like it gets to that. Of course, this is the scene where Jekyll is staring out the window, saying, waiting. In the 1931, he doesn't say anything.
He goes to her. He goes to
delivers the letter from Bath. He refuses it. He refuses to amuse himself in London to keep up appearances. Yeah, because surely you could amuse yourself or something.
Yeah,
you haven't had tea or you haven't slept. Actually,
yeah, and he goes to
seeing the smoke in the pipe. The kettle represents his boiling desire.
Yeah, we talked about that last time. Yeah.
And he transforms again, or he decides to transform.
I know how he learns. He doesn't learn about it from Poole. He goes back to Ivy's house, and the landlady is there.
Do you know where I can find her?
If I was wanting her, I'd try the Variety Music Hall.
Oh, I thank you.
You get out. What do you take me for?
And that's when he decides to go down there. He's looking for Ivy, period.
Yeah, in this movie, Poole is like, you should go to the Variety Music Hall.
It's kind of daring.
It's daring. I hate to see it like this. It's comical. Jekyll agrees it's comical, but it's not wise. In the previous one, he wanted to keep up appearances. That was the words. Tears up the letter on screen before staring at the garter.
That's it.
What makes him... He goes like, I could see her there.
So he
transforms.
He's at the variety show theater. It's got dancers on stage.
To mention, when he goes out in the 1931, we mentioned how he's looking at the rain. He doesn't taste the rain, but he looks around exactly like March Hyde does.
Yes, and the rain, to be honest, it looked fake. The rain looked fake.
We replicated it exactly. He's like, we replicated it, but they didn't make him taste it because, a human Hyde wouldn't do that. Beastly Hyde would.
Right, that makes sense. So they're at the variety show theater. They got dancers there. Ivy is not singing to anyone officially. She doesn't have her own theme song.
It's packed. It's one level as compared to two. There was a stairwell in 1931's bigger stage, more shots of the people in front than of the ladies dancing. Obviously, we don't get the lust element in this one, really.
Right.
Ivy's bartending. She's not standing around being gawked at. Not as iconic as a song as Champagne Ivy is my name.
Yeah, it's got You Should See Me Dance the Polka song.
In the 1930s, it's relatively small. There's no bar stands on this one.
Right.
There's loony music going on, no singing. And of course, Hyde is, talking to the waiter. He's like a
bottle of champagne and be quick about it. What are you staring at? Now, what are you waiting for? A tip, eh? Get out. Blighter.
Butler calls him Blighter, and he trips him and beats him further.
Yeah, in this one, he goes, he gives him a tip. He goes, "Here's a tip for you. Do you have family?"
He gives him a tip. He gives him a tip.
He gives him a
sovereign.
He still trips him.
He still trips him. He doesn't beat him. 7 shillings.
Right.
Skips away happily. The butler does. He doesn't call him Blighter. But then he beats him. He doesn't continue to beat him with the stick. He just trips him. And then he goes, what's a pity you are thinking of the children, no doubt.
Yes.
Have that girl, that barmaid, bring me some champagne.
I have that girl, that barmaid, bring me some champagne. I don't think you understood what I said.
In the previous one, he says, you tell that wenching brat to come here and have a wine with me.
Wow.
It's a lot rougher.
It is a lot rougher. But I think the fact that he wants her to bring him champagne is a nod to that she used to be called Champagne Ivy.
Yeah, but it's just bubbly. She says in this
movie. That's another word for champagne. So she doesn't have her own theme song, but she does sing, "You should see me dance the polka. You should see me cover the ground." That actually, the second time I watched this movie, I heard that song come back again. Not when Ivy is forced to sing it, but another situation, and I'll mention that when it comes up. So Hyde comes on a little too weird and strong and says, "You deserve better than that rat trap you live at." But of course, he said...
Oh, yeah. Well, to compare, 1930s, she struck pink.
This is indeed a great honor. I noticed you as you came in, my dear. There, I said to myself, is too pretty a girl to waste on such a companion. Oh, but you are pretty. And what a figure, my dear. What a figure.
And then he toasts her beauty, but she wants to leave, so she brings up that pigsty in Diadem Court.
You call that home? That pigsty of yours in Babin's Court?
Sty, is it? You come off that.
Oh, I like you when your temper's up, my dear.
How do you know where I live?
How do you know where I live?
I saw you on the street and followed you. Oh, my pretty, you deserve better. You ought to live in a place worthy of you.
Buckingham Palace, I suppose.
He offers silk clothes, bracelets, champagne.
And how am I to get it?
How do you think you're gonna get it, my bright little bird?
Uh-oh.
He says,
Hays
I'm
code.
no gentleman, no, but I have money. Well, Hays he calls her a bird in the 1930s.
No, I meant...
I'm no gentleman, no,
yeah.
but I have money.
Perhaps my looks don't please you.
Well, you ain't no beauty.
Quite right. I am no beauty. Perhaps you prefer a gentleman, eh? One of those fine-mannered, virtuous, and honorable gentlemen. One of those canting hypocrites who like your legs but talk about your garter.
What are you talking about?
Oh, my poor little innocent. It doesn't know what I'm talking about, eh?
And then is about to fight a man, and then physically blocks Ivy from leaving.
Forgive me, my dear. You see, I hurt you because I love you. I want you. What I want, I get.
Grant, I am no beauty, but under this exterior, you'll find a very
flower of a man. Right.
Yes, and
I love you. You understand? You'll come with me, eh?
But in the 1940s, comparing again, the script, a lot of Hyde just staring at Ivy as she's pouring the tea instead of starting it right off, and then gives a sovereign instead of half a quid as the payment. She's like, thanks, tries to leave, but Hyde prevents. She's like,
oh, but you're not going. Oh, no. After all, you brought 2 glasses. 2 minds with but a single thought. My, what a nice beginning.
Then he starts on the topic of her voice.
Oh, I like your singing. You must sing again for me sometime.
which is added foreshadowing. This leads to complimenting the prettiness.
Where did you get such a pretty voice? Perhaps it's the pretty place it comes from, huh?
He toasts to luck instead of beauty.
I make my own luck, my dear.
And then Hyde replies, yes, and tonight I follow the rainbow.
Tonight I follow the rainbow.
Perhaps we should follow it together.
I followed right home, mister.
To that rat trap?
Hey, what are you calling names?
Well, I think you deserve something better.
How do you know where I live?
Well, I can't imagine. Surely your wages here don't earn you a place in Berkeley Square.
She tries to leave, but he doesn't let her. So the conversation is much shorter. Obviously, much more of it is spent staring.
Right.
And, the language he uses is much different. The rainbow stuff, he's, like, being cryptic, I guess.
Yes.
As compared to the 1931's language, which is much different.
It's much more overt. And, giving hints that, I've been at your apartment before. I know about the garter and all this kind of stuff, and he's throwing shade at his Jekyll side.
Exactly.
So there is he starts a brawl with other bar goers.
It's him. He insulted her. He's lying, I tell you. Don't pay no. He tried to break her arm. Yes, tried to break her arm. You will, eh?
And then he makes these false claims. He makes these false claims with her boss to pays him off to fire her.
A great man can always change his mind. For a reason. Yes, sir. Why, certainly, sir. Yes, sir. A troublemaker. That's what she is. Out she goes.
I don't remember that in the 30s.
That was not in the 1930s version.
Right. So he waits outside. She gets fired. And comes out. And he's there to rescue her. He's in the carriage, and he says, "Oh, I'll take you home."
Oh, well, how fortunate I'm here. I'd like to help you.
Oh, just let me back in there so I can bash him on the nose, that's all.
And he says that he's talking about the nectar of the gods, the ancient songs of pleasure, and putting Athena and Diana to shame when going to his house. She belongs to the immortals.
And don't be frightened of me, will you, Ivy? When a botanist finds a rare flower, he shouts his triumph, doesn't he?
And then when she's like, yo, you're really weird, he says, oh, she doesn't know what I'm talking about, which is interesting because in the previous we heard it.
Yeah.
Doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
My poor little innocent. It doesn't know what I'm talking about, eh?
And he does take advantage.
What is he talking about, like Athena and stuff, and the rainbow is like, it's much more
it's very mythological. He's like, very epic with his language, a little too much. And he does take advantage of her because they go to black, they fade to black like a lot of Hays Code pictures did. Okay, so the next scene is on the continent, aka where I guess it's in France or whatever, where Beatrix and her father are, and he's getting better from the gout. Beatrix gets a letter not from Henry Jekyll but from Lanyon. He says, I don't know why you haven't heard back from Henry, but I'll check on him. Beatrix's father...
She disguises it as, housing, because she's using the newspaper, housing in the East End.
I have never seen such deplorable housing conditions. Surely the city father should find funds to him.
Because the dad asks, so what did Henry say? And she's like, oh, nothing. He's talking about housing conditions. And he's like...
He doesn't.
Well,
say
that's very.
anything.
That's very.
It's very good
of him.
Maybe he's getting better. He's not using the love languages.
Yeah, he's more about society and he's more he's talking about society's morals and everything like that. That's kind of like he's going, oh, he's very standard now, and then like okay.
Then we get to Ivy's house, which has basically the same layout as 1930s.
Pretty much.
Without all the statues and paintings of like Cupid and Psyche and stuff. That is the symbolism. Doesn't have that.
She gets a knock on the door, but it's not who it was in the 1931 version.
That was like
the landlady.
Yeah,
but it's Marcia, her friend.
Instead, it's Marcia, her friend, and I think there's another dude who comes later.
Yes, that's Marcia's boyfriend, I think.
Marcia's boyfriend, which, as I know, makes her feel less alone than she was. Or a bit less alone than she ever was in with just the landlady.
Yeah, with the landlady, it feels like she doesn't have any friends except for male guys who are gonna lavish money on her for reasons. Let's just say that.
Yeah, in this case, Marcia's like, let's go out, join a quartet and go to the Empire, which
is probably a club or a bar. And she changed clothes. Get out of that dress that you're in. Don't you have something nicer? and she's changing her dress, and Marcia
notices the scars.
That doesn't that happen in?
She's like, oh, the brute, but then Hyde enters.
Doesn't that happen in the 31 version? Is that the
Yes,
landlady notices the scars?
Yes, basically.
You see how I got these scars. You want to know how I got these scars? So, like you said, Edward Hyde comes in.
Well, aren't you going to introduce me to our charming visitor?
He seems to be interested in Marcia now that he sees her.
It's Marcia. This is my friend, Mr. Hyde. You heard me speak about him, haven't you?
Oh, yes, Marcia. I've heard a great deal about you.
He's like, I never gave a...
He says it would be interesting, the three of us in friendly conversation, which is creepy. And so Marcia forces her way out, pours some wine in front of the mirror. The interesting thing is Hyde is beginning the conversation with, are you worried that I'll become interested in Marcia? Which is
it's some jealousy talk. He's trying to get some jealousy going. I think what he says is I might be going, and he's trying to prepare her for when he might turn back into Jekyll. And I might be going sometime. And she's like, oh really? Which is the same thing that happened in the 31 version. Is she's like looking like she's kind of happy that he's leaving, and he's going, oh, it's sad that I'm leaving, and it's very similar.
I've got bad news for you, my dear. Very bad. I'm going away for a few days. And upon my word, if you don't seem pleased.
Supposing I had to take a trip from time to time.
You mean soon?
Well, now, I don't know. Oh, you mustn't look so worried. It won't be for a long, long time.
These lines are very similar in this parts.
Oh, yeah, he starts with, spit out your real feelings that you hate me.
You hate me, don't you? I'm not good enough for you. I'm not a nice, kind gentleman like that. Nice, kind gentlemen who are so good to look at and so... cowards, weaklings.
Bullies her into saying she does love him, or that she doesn't hate him, so therefore she loves him. And as they hold her, he reveals he's going away.
But pleasure is brief in this world, my sweet. And yours is most uncertain because you don't know when I'll be back, do you? You belong to me. And if you do one thing that I don't approve of while I'm gone, the least little thing, mind you, I'll show you what horror means.
Which is
that's scarier than the Hyde and
he's much scarier.
He's creepier. I mean, even though the other one's creepy, it's just the other one is just you could see him like eating somebody. That's what.
Although the conversation goes differently in an equal way, which is interesting.
I'm such a tease, aren't I? Such a tease. Ah, what a lucky man I am to be loved this way.
He nonchalantly grabs a grape, and the previous one was a crumpet, brings up leaving for a while, much more immediately than he does in the previous. He sits down, he says,
but supposing I did have to leave you for a while.
Leave, sir? When?
I'm not saying when, I said suppose.
They say that the Empire and such places are ever...
Who does?
Oh, Marcia, sir. She says it's ever so gay.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh, we can go, can't we?
He ignores the request, basically, and says, let's go to Albert Hall instead. And so she's like, he's actually gonna let me out. Let me go get my things. He says, don't hurry, because we aren't going.
Right. He's teasing her and then pulling back, and then tease and then pull back. And he finally is like, oh, we'll be here. What are we gonna do? We're gonna play cards.
And so instead,
read a book.
We're gonna play cards.
Sing for me.
You've already played that. Yeah, then we could read Paradise Lost to me, but we don't have any books
which
here.
I think Paradise Lost was a hint to that he likes Lucifer.
This was as he was playing piano. He just jumps straight to her piano. She screams refusal, and he corners her to the wall.
Sing it gaily.
I can't, truly, I can't.
Sing it with deep compassion.
Please, sir, don't ask
me. Loving kindness.
Smile as you sing.
A prima donna is born. Let's shower her with orchids.
Which more interesting little tidbits in this, which is
but you notice he starts playing the "You Should See Me Dance" the polka like on the piano, like very nicely. He's like he changes from whatever he's playing into the polka.
Yeah, he's like, we're not going. Walks up to the piano and starts playing.
They fade to black, so which means he's taking advantage of her again. Then Hyde is heading home to Jekyll's. And he takes out his key and goes in the back door, turns back into Jekyll. Poole brings Jekyll a telegram from Beatrix and her father, which says they're most likely coming home. And upon learning that, he vows not to take the serum again. He destroys the key to the street entrance of the laboratory. And
yeah, in the 1930s, he just chucks the key, and it's just somehow gone, I guess. So
wow. So the other one is
In this one, he
actually
actually burns
destroys it. He melts it down. Yeah. He sends a hand-delivered letter via the butler.
The previous one, it was Poole. In this one, it's a mail boy. He's like, letter for you, governor.
Right. Okay. The mail boy delivers it to Ivy's house, and the other one was Poole
Yes.
hand-delivered it.
Poole hand-delivered it to the post office.
Right. So Marcia and her boyfriend visit Ivy, and while they're there, the letter from Jekyll with this anonymous gift of money comes to the door. Okay, and Ivy is in dire straits about what to do. Should she delete herself? She talks about going down to the river. That's what that means.
Oh, if I could only do it, I'd go down to the river.
If she spends the money to run away, Hyde will find out. It'll be even worse for her.
Oh, well, yeah. There are some differences with the script, so it's used
Okay.
to the famous Dr. Jekyll.
Well, I'm the one you and your friend took home that night. Huh?
I feel like that's a bit different. What brings you here? Are you ill?
There. That's what. Look at that. Pretty, ain't it?
That's her scars. She reveals her scars. You see a thing like that, I'll get you lotion.
Lotion? It won't be lotion that'll do the trick, sir. It's more than that. I need help. I do. I can't stand it anymore.
It's Hyde, sir. It's a man I know, Mr. Hyde.
It's him that's done it and more.
That goes basically.
Well,
like
that's
almost the same.
that's.
It's a man I know, Mr. Hyde is a new line. It's him that's done it more. I can't tell you. He ain't human.
He ain't a human. He's a beast. And he won't let me go, sir. And I'm afraid to run away.
Then he brings up Marcia and Freddie, the boyfriend.
Well, they say it's my nerves, and they say that you know about such things, that you could help me.
That's new.
I can't help and drink no more.
She doesn't bring up drowning herself, which was a detail in the previous one.
I've tried to drown myself, but I can't.
She just talks about, giving me poison so I can kill myself.
Well, she says that. She says that too when she meets with Jekyll.
Yes, Jekyll is like, why didn't you try to get help? Go to police.
Tell you, I'm afraid.
Oh, he ain't a man. He's a devil, he is. Why, he knows what you are thinking about, he does.
Why, if he knows that I've been here today, I don't know what he'll do. It won't be nothing human, I can tell.
Which is sort of along the same exact words.
Pretty much, yeah.
Please help me keep him off. I'll do anything you ask, sir. She doesn't speak about slavery either, as in the 1930s.
I'll be your slave.
And then, of course, I ain't bad looker myself, but she says,
Men say that I ain't a bad looker when I'm more myself.
Which is extra padding, which is interesting.
Right.
Probably softening a little. She's not saying that she's a bad looker. She says men say, when I'm more myself. You liked me once, didn't you? You're a fine, kind gentleman. And then new lines. Honest, that night when you walked out of my place, I made as if I didn't care. I did care. After you kept gone, I wish you'd come back. Surely I did. And then we go into Hyde Jekyll says, this man Hyde will never trouble you. I give you my word. She's like, how do you know? He'll come back and kill me. No, he won't come back. I'll see to it. You don't know him, sir. He ain't human. He ain't. I give you my word. You'll never see him again. You must believe me. And so that goes basically that way too. Basically that same way as the previous, except those lines.
There's a party later that night, and it's to officially announce the actual nuptials marriage of.
Oh yeah, because he was like, you can actually marry now. In the previous movie, he's quoting like Romeo and Juliet. The standing on the misty mountaintops part, and walking through the tall rooms. He plays the organ like happily. It wastes some of the time, and he goes like, hey sir, there's Ivy's here. I believe that's how that went down.
Yes.
But yeah, you can see him. He has much more joy. In this one, he's just whistling away as he's going toward his marriage.
But wait. The thing is, he's going to the party. There's a couple things that are missing. So the first thing that's different is he's whistling just a normal tune, and it starts turning in.
Yeah, in the previous one, he was like walking home. He's like talking about Romeo and Juliet, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so happy." Versus this one, he's just merely whistling.
Yeah, when he's walking towards the party, he's whistling. It starts changing into "You Should See Me Dance the Polka."
Oh, well, that's
I listened to it again, and I was like, wait a minute. It sounds like he's whistling "You Should See Me Dance the Polka." And he notices...
Yeah, which he notices he
starts to sing something, do something else.
And then he starts to transform. In the previous one, he quotes odes to Nightingale to a bird in a park.
With a cat. A cat is attacking it.
Thou wast not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. Thou wast not born for death.
And then a cat attacks it, and he transforms, and then he runs in the park off to Ivy.
It was
Muriel's late for Muriel's wedding, and he heads off to Ivy's immediately.
Yes, he does. Instead,
where Ivy is, here's to hoping Hyde rots where he is or burns terribly. She drinks in front of the mirror. Hyde walks in. He confronts her about Jekyll, her lover. Is death. She's counted on the couch. He reveals who he is, that he is, I am Jekyll. And he's like choking
I don't
her.
think he says I am Jekyll in the 41 version, though.
Yes, no, it goes
a little more subtle.
That in him you saw a bit of me. Hyde.
Yeah, in the previous one, she doesn't drink. She has a lower mumbly voice. She didn't really drink much of it on the screen.
Right.
As she did in the 1931. Hyde starts with, are you surprised I'm here? She addresses that you've been drinking. Perhaps see a doctor. Jekyll's a good man. Go see him. So that's interesting. In the previous one, of course, he immediately confronts her about Jekyll.
Yeah. And then this one, he kind of makes fun of her.
He kind of addresses the present first.
He makes fun of her for falling in love with Jekyll. What do you think he's gonna do? Ever end up with somebody like you?
Dance and dream. Dream that you're Mrs. Henry Jekyll of Harley Street. Dancing with your own butler and 6 footman.
Again, it's a Cinderella kind of. He says.
And then instead of revealing that he is Jekyll, instead in this movie he goes, you were standing there. You thought that as after you were talking,
Your cheap little dreams.
Yeah, you thought that he might have seen a little bit of Hyde in Jekyll. And that's a big difference.
He does strangle her. He does strangle her to death.
He does strangle her to death, but he jumps over the landing to block her in both movies, which is iconic. In the 1931, I noted, "There's my darling, my little bride. Isn't Hyde a lover after your own heart?" I believe he says too much of that in this movie.
Right.
But I didn't make. I stopped making notes after this.
Well,
he bolts. Yeah. The people are suspicious of him bolting. He jumps down a flight. I believe it does in this.
I think it's a stunt guy. It does. It looks like somebody a little bit more.
And then he runs down the street briefly with the rest of it walking. He isn't able to get into his house, and so he knocks on the door. Poole doesn't let him in. And then the wedding is over, and General Crew won't let him see him again.
That same thing happened.
How does it play out in this movie?
Well, after killing her, Hyde is able to escape, but without his backdoor lab key, Poole disallows him from entering the front door of the house. So he goes over, and it shows, of course, Beatrix and her father are disappointed that Dr. Jekyll was absent from the dinner party. Sorry, Mr. Hyde steals what looks like, I guess, paper and pen from like a store. He writes a note. Lanyon goes to Jekyll's place to see what's going on, and Hyde is desperate to revert back to Dr. Jekyll, so he leaves a written note for Dr. Lanyon to instruct him to get vials of chemicals from the lab, take them back home, and give them to a courier, aka Mr. Hyde. And he says, "In the name of heaven, don't fail me, Harry." Of course, that means Henry. When Hyde arrives, Dr. Lanyon is concerned and asks some questions and stuff like that. He's like, but Hyde is impatient, very dismissive of the questions. He just wants the vials. He steals them from Lanyon, and Lanyon pulls a gun on him. And Hyde just decides to take the potions in front of Dr. Lanyon. He warns him about what he's getting himself into.
But probably not as much as he did in 1931.
He confesses to a lot more stuff, yeah.
Do you want to be left as you are, or do you want your eyes and your soul to be blasted by a sight that would stagger the devil himself?
So many iconic lines in 1931. Like, so much of that movie I remember. It's just more iconic. And in this one, probably due to recency, but it's just not as memorable in general. I do, of course, say that there's that classic image of a man bolting down the Victorian streets in black cape, cane, and hat.
Yeah, and I thought that those were really well done, but they're over so quickly. So Jekyll, confesses, and he says that he's going to visit Beatrix. He visits Beatrix, and he basically ends their engagement. The big difference between the 31 one that I remember is the 31 one was more dramatic. I mean, he was saying things like, penance and purgatory and sin.
Yes.
I give you up because I love you so. This is my proof. This is my penance. Do you hear, oh God? This is my penance.
Flowery language everywhere, even as Hyde. He has the mannerisms, the calling the bird and the dissociation and the stuff that doesn't appear in this one. He's just a starer, I guess.
Yeah, and he just stares straight ahead and says, we can't be
married. I must never see you again.
it's interesting comparing the ways that they go about things.
Yeah, and I have to say that Frederick March is
yeah,
going for it. He is.
Yeah, Frederick March in this one, he goes up to Ivy and he's like, this is my penance.
You mean to Muriel? To Muriel.
To Muriel, yes. But in this one, he doesn't say like jack squat to me.
Yeah, he's very like, we just can't. And she says, you don't love me, do you? And he does hug her and says, oh, you do love me. You're trying to keep me from being hurt. Now, the trick is that he leaves. She's crying. And as he's going out the door, he goes out the door, and then it shows him come back in. You think it's Dr. Jekyll, but it is Mr. Hyde. Her crying has made him transform back. She screams before losing consciousness, and her father, hearing the scream, he comes back outside. He gets bludgeoned to death by Hyde with Jekyll's cane, of course. Hyde flees back to the laboratory, and he can't enter through the street door, but he pushes past Jekyll's butler Poole, knocks him to the ground. The police investigate Beatrix's father's body. Lanyon arrives, and he goes, okay, I know that cane. That's Jekyll's. I know whose cane that is. Follow me. He knows that Jekyll committed the crime while he was Mr. Hyde. So Lanyon convinces the police to accompany him over to Jekyll's home. And in the laboratory, Jekyll reverts to normal. So a lot of this is starting to come back to what happened in the 31 version. The authorities come in. He's Dr. Jekyll, and they're like, oh, well, I guess we got to go look for that guy Hyde. He's not in this room. And Lanyon stops him and says, there's your man. In the 31 version, it's a little bit more interesting because I think because he points right at us. I remember mentioning this to you when we did the review of 31.
Yeah.
Is it felt like, I don't know, maybe I was reading into it, but he was pointing at us saying, there's your man. It's basically saying, I took that to mean that there's a Hyde in every one of you people out there in the theater.
There he is. There's your man.
That's what I said. And maybe I'm reading into it, but that's just why these, a lot of that first person viewpoint in the 31 thing stuck with me a lot more, including that part. But again, they have a little fight, and he gets shot, and he starts turning back into Dr. Jekyll. There's a part where when he's turning from Jekyll to Hyde, and he's going, I'm Henry Jekyll. And he says it again and again, and they keep doing this fade off, and it's just he's just standing there.
I've done nothing. I'm Dr. Jekyll. I'm Dr. Henry Jekyll. I've done nothing. I'm Dr. Jekyll. I'm Dr. Henry Jekyll, I tell you. I've done nothing. You're looking for a man named Hyde. Hyde!
That's one of the things I would
too
have
slow.
loved to have in the 1930s.
The change was too slow.
They had the symbolism of the fire burning him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Honestly, the transformations weren't as cool as the original movie, but they definitely felt way longer because there's less progress made in comparison. Because, the 1930s, you can see him transforming into a beast. There's much more contrast of appearance between that and just Hobo Man.
Yeah, and the makeup with Hyde does get worse and worse. His teeth get kind of nastier looking.
But it is more apparent in the 1930s.
Oh yeah, his eyelids.
Stretching.
His eyelids are like, yeah. Again, I don't.
His eyelids.
I don't know.
The ending surprised me a lot. Because just this movie has Lanyon quoting the Bible with chorus music, dramatic.
They're saying,
"What?
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want."
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He lies me down in the green pastures, and why?
No, but that's
why that verse? That's was Psalm 115 or something.
Psalm 24, 24 Psalm. No, here's the thing about that is what hit me is I went, okay, it started with a church and religious, and it ends with something you say over the dead to consign them to heaven,
and a heavenly chorus a la things to come.
But the first one, it led me to believe, yeah, he's dead, but he's burning in hell.
Burn in the double hockey sticks. In this one, he's going to heaven still.
Well, that's the thought because they're consigning his soul to heaven.
The code was punish the criminals justly because don't have them get away with the crimes really. But he gets to heaven anyway. Is what is that saying? What does that mean?
I don't know.
Go,
I think they were.
Is there something they're trying to tell us more instead of what they said or what they didn't say really with the 19.
They did not go into detail, no. But again, I liked the 31 version because for many different reasons. But one of them was that I was thinking about the kettle overflowing and bubbling over, and I'm like, that kettle is him, and also the flames of fire is very hellish. Yeah.
And I mean, the only one part where he does have a temper with Dr. Heath, the bull is out of the china shop. He is much better after he gets fresh air.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean Spencer Tracy did see his version later, and he was like, that's the worst job I've ever done. He said that it's the worst acting he's ever had, and
it's not that bad, but I can sort of see where he's coming from.
Well, he's played in he's played much better parts, and when he later gets into those screwball comedies with Katharine Hepburn.
Justice, that's usually reserved for men. The same unwritten law that got Lenehan off. I know what you're going to say. That he should have been convicted too, but he wasn't. And you're not going to put this poor soul away just because she had the misfortune to be born a female.
Just one word in it.
If I could
Wise,
help it.
couldn't I? Could I please get a word in edgewise?
Well, go ahead.
Not one syllable. Not one syllable of
You're
what
too
you have
excited.
been blabbering here tonight.
You always do that when you get excited.
He shows an aptitude for that kind of that comedic way of acting. I hate to say it, but he has dramatic chops. I'll agree, but I seem to remember him more in those parts because he seems to be better at it.
I just don't get why they had to hide and burn away the original movie, because the original movie is so much more iconic. This movie doesn't really have much iconic.
Well, thank you for somebody
of the man bolting down the Victorian streets, which again you could sort of get with Jack the Ripper, but Jack the Ripper probably didn't run as much as this image.
Yeah, and the thing is though that there was never really any story of chasing him physically. They always in the story of Jack the Ripper, they always would find his crime scenes after the fact. And there's many different theories about there's a whole podcast on who Jack the Ripper might have been. And it's really, and when they talk about what this guy did in his crimes, it's pretty rough. But to be honest, it may be something we'll never truly solve. And again, if Jack the Ripper exists, he's dead. He's dead. If Jack the Ripper ever existed, he's dead by now. Come on, seriously.
Yeah, he's the 1850s. Like, what you expect him to be like? Yeah, probably like 200 years old.
Yeah. And to be honest, this movie was entertaining in bits, but the movie that sticks in my brain and doesn't really let go is the Frederick March version. And if you can catch that one, that's the one to watch.
Wolfiness about his appearance.
Oh, are you segueing into the next episode?
Yes, the next episode will be my dad's or at least probably my dad's top 3.
It's one of my favorites.
Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman are probably his top 3 in no order.
Yes,
in no particular order.
I like the Wolfman. It's a very favorite.
He loves the Wolfman. It's one of his favorites, and I haven't seen it yet. The great tales of the wolves and the shooting with the silver and the wolves bane and the gypsy people out in the grassy forest.
Yeah,
I don't know, the villages
and the curse, a curse, and yeah. And what we expect when we see a Wolfman. I mean, that's what this movie is all about. A lot of the
accusing people of being werewolves.
Yes,
all that stuff, all that atmosphere.
Now, it wasn't the
in that next episode.
It wasn't the original. Of course, we did. We're going to be comparing a lot of Werewolf of London to this.
Yeah, Werewolf of London was the originator of a lot of it.
It was, but this one is the iconic one that people remember more, to be honest.
Yes, but we will be getting to it, and we've covered. We're probably not going to do any more Jekyll and Hyde stuff. So yeah, these 2 episodes, the one in season 1 and this one, recommend you probably see the one in season 1 if you haven't already. It'll sort of put a basis for what we're
context,
talking about. Context, but yeah, it doesn't sound as great as we do now because, of course, we've improved, just so you know. But, yeah, this was, we did this, and there are lots of interesting comparisons, and, Jekyll and Hyde is just something, especially in 1931, is very iconic to me. I remember a lot of it myself, but there's just, it's just all of this, stigma we've digged into. and we're gonna have to leave it behind.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean,
We've been going on for long enough.
We've been going on for quite a while, and we want to leave you with that even though that there may be remakes that are actually really, really good. And if we want to talk, let's next
in this
we'll
one,
talk about that later.
On its own right, but it can't really escape.
It doesn't compare
more than it doesn't super compare. I mean, it can stand on its own 2 feet, and it is pretty good, but it's not as good or as iconic in our minds, or at least in my mind.
And if you want to, when we get together next episode, I'll have some more information for you about remakes that I wanted to bring to your attention.
Sure. So you want to conclude us off?
Yep. I want you guys to have a good day, a good afternoon, a good night. Don't give in to your evil side. Keep it at bay.
Keep it hidden.
Oh,
the pun doesn't really work.
Hiding inside.
I was worried that if I just said hidden, then it would have lost the pun. But whatever. Auf Wiedersehen, guys. I said Auf Wiedersehen last segment, but Auf Wiedersehen still works.
It does. It does.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.
And, sayonara.
Yep. Auf Wiedersehen. Bye.
Off we go away hiding.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. Click here and here for some more excellent content. Hope you'll enjoy it. See you soon.